I'm Isaac, 31, and apparently the black sheep of the family. It's not a title I chose. It's one they started whispering after I stopped going along with their games. I didn't storm out of any reunion. I didn't get drunk at a birthday party. I just stopped paying. For everything. See, for a long time, I was the unofficial family bank. Need a rental car? Isaac can get it. He travels for work. He's got points. Booking a hotel for a cousin's wedding? Isaac can cover it. He'll write it off. The worst part? I actually believed them. I told myself it was just generosity. That this was what family does. Then came the cruise. It started casually, like it always does. Aunt Melanie dropped a message in the group chat. Thinking of a cruise next spring? Family getaway. Suddenly the chat exploded. Even the quiet cousins chimed in. Memes. Shirt designs. Polls about destinations. I saw it all secondhand, because I wasn't in the group chat. At first, I thought maybe I was just removed by accident. My phone had glitched before, so I texted my mom. Hey, what's this about a cruise? 3 dots. Then, oh, we didn't think you'd be interested. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Not angry, just hollow. The same kind of hollow I'd felt when they told me I wasn't needed at my nephew's baptism because there were already enough uncles. The same hollow I got when I found out the family photos were taken, without me, during a weekend I'd been told was canceled. I texted back. I wasn't even asked. She left me on read. I didn't hear anything for weeks after that, until my bank flagged a large transaction, 14,000 euros. Cruise payment. It wasn't fraud. I recognized the travel agency, the same one we always used. The same account I'd used to book everything for our big Europe trip 5 years ago. Turns out, my dad never removed my card from the family account. I could have canceled it right then. I thought about it. But something in me, maybe the part that still believed they'd apologize, held back. Instead, I waited. The day they left, I didn't even know they were gone. No goodbye, no check-in, just silence. Until I opened Instagram and saw it. A sea of matching shirts that read Cruise Crew 2025. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my godmother. Every generation was there. Every face smiling. Except mine. And then I got the call. It was my dad. Wait, you're not on the ship? I said nothing. Just breathed. He chuckled like it was a misunderstanding. You didn't miss the boarding, did you? You were supposed to meet at gate 3 with the others. Still, I didn't respond. My stomach was cold. Then a message buzzed through from my cousin Elise. A photo of the ship's dining hall. Table settings. 19 chairs. One of them had a name card, Isaac. A stranger was sitting there, smiling at the camera with a glass of wine in hand. Below it, guess the black sheep got the message. That was it. That was the moment something inside me hardened. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been erased. They had planned to use me. Book everything under my account. Take the seat with my name on it. Let someone else enjoy the meal I'd unknowingly paid for. And they had the audacity to mock me for not being there. I stood up from my desk, walked to the window, watched the traffic pass in the morning light. Then I opened the travel app. I knew how it worked. The group reservation was in my name. That meant I had the authority. I could cancel the entire booking as long as they hadn't officially sailed. And they hadn't. The app gave a final warning. Are you sure you want to cancel this reservation? This action is irreversible. No refunds guaranteed. I tapped yes. 5 seconds later, it was done. I sat in silence. Not angry. Not satisfied. Just still. An hour passed. Then the calls began. And then a message from Elise again. What did you do? I didn't answer. Then came a string of voicemails, one more frantic than the last. Isaac, please, we're still at port. We can't get on without the booking. They won't let us back on. They're saying the reservation's void. Isaac, this isn't funny. People flew in for this. You're being dramatic. Grow up and fix this. Now, we're begging you. Just talk to us. But I didn't. I turned off my phone. Let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt like the wolf. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The air was still, heavy with that early summer humidity that makes everything feel slow and deliberate. I didn't reach for my phone. I let it sit on the nightstand, vibrating every few seconds like a wounded animal begging for attention. 84 missed calls. 43 messages. My mother had even left me a voice note, whispering through sobs. I didn't listen. Instead, I made coffee. Black. Strong. Sat down at the kitchen table and just breathed. I don't think I'd realized how much space they took up in my mind. Every decision I made, every vacation, every saved dollar, every free weekend was always weighed against them. Would Mom guilt trip me if I didn't visit? Would Dad expect me to split the bill again? Would Aunt Melanie forget her wallet and make a joke about how I made more money anyway? It had been a quiet suffocation for years. And now, the quiet was mine. Around 7:12 a.m., the front door rattled. Knocking, then more knocking, then fists. Isaac, open this door right now. It was my father's voice, sharp and furious. Through the peephole, I saw him and Elise. Her hair was still damp, her face red with tears or rage, probably both. My dad was holding a manila folder. His mouth was moving fast, like he was rehearsing an argument he'd been saving since last night. I didn't open the door. Instead, I unlocked it just long enough to slide a yellow sticky note onto the glass. Not your bank. Not your backup plan. Not your punching bag. He saw it. Froze. Elise stepped back like she'd just been hit. He knocked again. Quieter this time. Son, we can fix this. It got out of hand. We didn't mean to leave you out. I didn't respond. I let them stand there for 10 full minutes. Then I heard their footsteps fade. Their car starting. Tires pulling away. And finally, silence again. A few hours later, my cousin Darren, one of the few I actually trusted, texted me privately. Man, they're melting down. Half the family missed their flights home. Aunt Jan's trying to sue the cruise line. And your mom's been crying since breakfast. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel victorious. But I did feel something like peace. Not because they were miserable, but because I finally stopped apologizing for not letting them treat me like a wallet with a heartbeat. That night, I got a knock on my door again. Not my dad this time. It was my younger sister, Rachel. She looked nervous. She'd always kept her distance when things got tense. Too quiet to pick sides, too scared to make waves. I didn't know. Isaac, she said quietly. I swear. I thought you backed out. That's what they told me. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I didn't say anything. She held up a canvas tote. Inside, my cruise shirt. Still folded. Still in its plastic. They had this made for you. With the rest. They planned for you to be there. I raised an eyebrow. She swallowed. But when I asked why you weren't in the group chat, Mom said, he wouldn't care. He always ruins the vibe. There it was. The part they didn't expect anyone to repeat. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I took the tote bag, gently, and set it down beside the door. I'm not mad at you, Rachel, I said. But if you want to stay out of this, stay out of it. She gave a sad nod. I get it. I do. And she left. I closed the door and locked it. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a solo trip, just for me. No group text. No itinerary built around who wanted what excursion. A quiet retreat on the cliffs of Santorini, with nothing but a backpack, a camera, and a long overdue sense of freedom. And as I hit confirm, another message buzzed in from my dad. One line. Please, if you won't talk to us, at least give us a chance to make this right. I didn't respond. Not yet. But part of me was curious what making it right even looked like to people who never thought they were wrong. I didn't block their numbers. Not yet. I wanted the trail. The proof. The desperation. The next day, the group chat I hadn't been invited to, Family Trip 2025, suddenly appeared on my phone. No explanation. No context. Just there. 19 people. A digital parade of relatives I hadn't heard from in months, maybe years, suddenly acting like I was part of the club again. The first message? A meme. A cheap, guilt-trippy cartoon of a broken bridge with the words, family. We can repair it, if we try. Then came the flood. Aunt Melanie texted, we all made mistakes. Let's move forward, not backward. Love you. Uncle Darren texted, it was a miscommunication, Isaac. No one meant to hurt you. Mom texted, you're my son. That means more than money or travel or anything. Dad texted, what happened shouldn't define our relationship. Call me. Elise texted, okay, yes, what I texted was mean, but you know I was just being sarcastic. Cousin Jared texted, come on dude. It's just a cruise. Not like we burned your house down. Grandma sent a voice memo, softly crying. You were always my favorite, Isaac. This whole thing is tearing the family apart. I stared at the screen, not typing, not deleting, just watching. The irony? They still didn't get it. It wasn't about the cruise. It wasn't about a seat at the table, or matching t-shirts, or even the money. It was about being written out, again and again, and expected to foot the bill anyway. It was about years of being invisible until something needed to be signed, paid for, or arranged. It was about learning to stop asking why I was always last, and instead asking why I still showed up at all. A minute later, a second group chat appeared. Just the siblings Red Heart. I'd never even known that existed. Rachel must have added me. It was smaller, quieter. Only 4 of us. Rachel, me, Elise, and our brother, Mark, who lived across the country and barely answered texts. Rachel, I'm sorry again, Isaac. For real this time. I believed Mom when she said you were too busy and probably wouldn't come anyway. I should have known better. Mark, TBH, I didn't even know the cruise was this week until they posted photos. Not surprised they pulled this stunt again. I got forgotten at Thanksgiving. Elise, can we please stop acting like this was some giant conspiracy? You could have just said something, Isaac. Instead of nuking the whole vacation. I finally responded. My first words to any of them since the photo. Isaac, you replaced me at dinner before I'd even said a word. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Seen by Elise. No reply. Rachel hearted it. Mark sent a thumbs up emoji. It was enough. 2 days passed. Silence again, blessed, clean silence. I went for walks. I cooked. I reread old books that still had sand in the spine from my last real vacation, 5 years ago. I didn't check the app. I didn't scroll. But I did get one unexpected letter. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name. The envelope smelled faintly of lavender soap, my mother's signature scent since I was a kid. The note inside was short. I know we crossed a line. I know it's not the first. But this family is breaking, and I can't hold it together without you. Please, come to the house. Just once. Let us explain. It didn't say, I'm sorry. It didn't say you were right. It didn't say we hurt you. But it said enough. And more importantly, it gave me an idea. I wouldn't go back for them, but I would let them gather. On my terms. So I sent one text to the original Family Trip 2025 group. Isaac, if you want to talk, come to the house Sunday at 3. All of you. One chance. You get 20 minutes. After that, I'm done for good. The typing bubbles began instantly. Dad, we'll be there. Mom, thank you, baby. Aunt Melanie, praise God. Elise, oh, this should be good. Grandma, I'll bring lemon bars. But what they didn't know was that I'd already been preparing for this. Because that house was mine. Legally. Fully paid off. Titled in my name for years. The guest list might have been mine too, but the rules? Those were about to change. Sunday came like a courtroom summons. I spent the morning cleaning, not the floors or windows, but the energy. I opened all the curtains, let the light in, made sure every chair in the living room was dusted and neatly spaced, like I was staging the house for a showing. Because in a way I was. I didn't cook, didn't light candles, didn't set out drinks. This wasn't a reunion. It was an autopsy. At 2:58 p.m., the driveway filled. Like clockwork. SUVs, minivans, a dented Corolla with 3 kids in the back. I watched through the upstairs window as they trickled in. Aunt Melanie, in another floral blouse that made her look friendlier than she was. Uncle Darren, who probably still thought this was a misunderstanding. Elise, chewing gum like she had nothing to prove. And finally, my parents, side by side. My mother held a glass dish wrapped in foil. My father had a manila folder under his arm again. They looked nervous. Good. At 3:01, I opened the door. No smile. No greetings. Just a gesture, a wave toward the living room. Sit. They filed in, murmuring. The air felt strange, like a classroom just before a test was handed out. I waited until every seat was filled. Then I closed the door, locked it, and walked to the center of the room. 20 minutes, I said. That's all you get. They stared. Some looked at each other. My dad cleared his throat. Son. No, I cut him off. Don't start with that word like it still means what it used to. You don't get to lead this. He sat back down, stunned. I turned to the group. Before anyone speaks, I want to read something. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a sheet of paper. It wasn't long, just a list, but it held years. November 2019. You asked me to pay the deposit on Mark's wedding venue. You said I'd be reimbursed. I wasn't. A few people shifted in their chairs. March 2020. You used my credit card for the family cabin trip without asking. When I brought it up, you said it was easier this way. My mother looked down at her lap. August 2021. I was told I wasn't really needed at the family barbecue because there were too many people coming. I found out later the guest list was over 40. Aunt Melanie opened her mouth, but I held up a finger. She closed it. December 2022. Elise posted a photo captioned, "The Real Family Christmas." I wasn't in it. Elise rolled her eyes. "That was a joke. You can defend it later," I snapped. "Let me finish." I folded the paper and tucked it back into my pocket. "I'm not reading this for pity," I said. "I'm reading it so none of you can pretend you forgot. None of this was an accident. This was a pattern." And the cruise. I looked straight at my father. "That was the final test. You left me off the list. Off the group chat. Off the ship. But not off the bill. And then you acted surprised when I canceled it. Like I'd ruined your fun." Mom finally spoke. Her voice was trembling. We assumed you wouldn't come. You're always so distant." "Distant?" I laughed, a sharp, joyless sound. "You mean tired? From paying for everything while being treated like a footnote." "You never said anything," she shot back. "I shouldn't have to," I said louder now. "I shouldn't have to beg for inclusion in the family I help keep afloat. I shouldn't have to remind you that I exist unless you need a credit card." A long silence followed. Then Elise crossed her arms. "So what? This was all about money." I stared at her. "No, it's about respect. And you lost mine a long time ago." She scoffed. "You could have just said no instead of blowing up everyone's vacation." I stepped forward. "I did say no. You just never listened. You heard no as try again later." Aunt Melanie jumped in, her tone falsely sweet. "Let's not forget we're family. We've all made mistakes, but isn't forgiveness part of that?" "Funny," I said. "That only comes up when you need something." I walked over to the small side table by the TV, picked up a slim black folder, and turned back to them. "Which brings me to this." I opened it. Inside is a notarized notice stating that effective immediately, you are no longer authorized to use any account, travel service, or reward point under my name. The joint bank card has been closed. The shared airline mileage plan? Erased. All linked payment methods? Gone. I handed the folder to my dad. He took it with a stunned expression. "I didn't come here to scream or cry," I said. "I came to end this." My mom's voice cracked. "We can change." "No," I said. "You can't. And that's okay. But I don't owe you another chance to hurt me just because we shared DNA." Grandma finally spoke. Her voice was thin, trembling. "What do you want us to say?" I looked at her, the only one whose gaze held genuine regret. "Nothing," I said softly. "I don't want words anymore. I want distance. I want space to build a life that doesn't revolve around being forgotten." Mark, who'd sat silent the whole time, suddenly stood up. "I'm staying," he said, voice clear. I felt this too. I just didn't have the guts to say it. He walked to my side. The room shifted. Everyone else just watched. My father stood. "Isaac, don't do this." "I didn't," I replied. "You did. I'm just finishing it." I walked to the door, unlocked it, opened it. "You're free to go." They stood up slowly, like it hadn't fully registered. Like they were expecting some last-minute twist, a hug, a laugh, a just kidding. But there wasn't one. They filed out. Some murmured goodbyes. Others avoided my eyes. Elise was the last. She paused in the doorway. "You'll regret this one day." I met her stare, calm and unflinching. "No, I'll regret waiting this long." She left. I closed the door, locked it again. Mark turned to me. "You really mean it?" I nodded. "Yeah." He exhaled slowly. "So what now?" I looked around the quiet house. "Now," I said, "we start over. With less noise." That evening, we opened a bottle of wine, talked like brothers, laughed, planned a trip, just the two of us. No matching shirts, no group chats, no hidden strings, just peace. A week later, I got one more message from Rachel. I left the group chat. "Proud of you." I smiled, finally feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Free. My name is Daniel. I'm 27, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the background character in my own family. The one who held the camera, not the one in the photos. The one who offered rides, spotted dinners, lent out chargers, and listened to late-night breakdowns, but never the one people showed up for. And for the most part, I told myself it didn't matter. I was the chill one, the dependable one, the one who didn't need much. That's what my mom always said. Daniel doesn't mind. He's low maintenance. I let it slide for years. Every missed birthday, every brushed-aside accomplishment, every holiday where my name was an afterthought, I swallowed it with a smile and helped do the dishes after. But this year? This year broke something in me I didn't even know could still snap. My younger brother, Lucas, just turned 25 last weekend. If you heard the way my mom talked about it, you'd think he discovered a cure for cancer and was being knighted by the Queen. It's a quarter-century milestone, she said. We have to make it special. And they did. God, did they ever? They booked this rooftop lounge downtown, an exclusive place you needed a reservation for months in advance. My dad flew in Lucas's college buddies from across the country. They gifted him a designer watch that cost more than my first car, had banners made, ordered personalized cocktails named after inside jokes, even hired a photographer to take candids throughout the night like it was some kind of magazine feature. It was extravagant, loud, flashy, and fine. I didn't mind. Lucas is their favorite. Always has been. I smiled through the party, raised a toast, even helped take the damn group photo. I didn't say a word when my name got left off the family thank you post on Instagram. I didn't mention it when they cropped me out of the cover photo. I just clapped, cleaned up, and went home. Then my birthday came. It landed on a Thursday this year. I didn't expect anything major, just dinner, maybe a card, something that showed they remembered. I didn't even get a happy birthday until 3 p.m. A text. No emoji. Just happy birthday. Lowercase. I figured maybe they were planning something low-key after work. I drove home expecting maybe a small dinner, maybe my favorite lasagna in the oven, maybe just a cake. Instead, the kitchen was empty. Lights off. I heard the TV upstairs and found my mom watching a drama rerun, drink in hand. I awkwardly cleared my throat. Hey, is there anything planned for tonight? She blinked at me, almost confused, then laughed, actually laughed. You? Don't be ridiculous, she said, like I just asked if I was getting a Nobel Prize. I didn't answer. Just stood there for a second, hoping maybe she'd realize how hollow that moment felt. But she just turned back to the TV, unfazed. I walked back to my room like a ghost in my own house. On the counter sat a half-eaten sheet cake from the store. Chocolate. I hate chocolate. No name on it. No candles. No note. Just an afterthought with a corner missing, like someone got hungry and remembered last minute. That was it. That was the moment. Something in me cracked open, quiet but deep. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just walked back to my room, packed my bag with quiet, practiced motions, and dropped my spare key next to the bowl of change on the kitchen counter. No one saw me leave. No one even asked. I drove for 6 hours. No music. Just the sound of the engine and the wind and this dull, thudding emptiness in my chest that kept spreading. I didn't even know where I was going until I crossed the state line. I ended up in a cheap roadside motel with a flickering neon sign and a vending machine that stole my dollar. I lay on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many years I'd spent convincing myself this was normal, that I was okay being invisible. That's when my phone lit up. First, it was a text from my sister. Where are you? Then my mom. Please come back. We didn't mean it. Missed calls followed. My dad. My uncle. Even Lucas. One after the other, rapid fire like they were trying to plug a dam with their hands. They'd noticed I was gone. Finally. But it wasn't guilt in their words. It was panic. Like something had shifted, and they realized too late that they'd pushed the reliable one too far. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't want to say something I'd take back later. I just scrolled through the messages, one by one, until the phone died in my hand. I plugged it in, not out of urgency, but out of habit. Then I lay back down in the silence, thinking not just about them, but about me. Who I'd become, who I was when no one else was looking. And for the first time in my life, I started asking myself what I wanted. Not what they needed from me. Not what role I was supposed to fill, but what I needed. What kind of life I could live if I stopped waiting for people to choose me. That's when the motel room phone rang. Not my cell, the room phone. I stared at it. It rang again. And again. I didn't move. And then I picked it up. Daniel. It was my sister, Maddie. I didn't even know how she found the number to the motel, and for a second I wondered if they'd called every place in a 100-mile radius. Her voice was rushed, breathy, like she'd been crying or running. Are you okay? She asked, and it was the first time I'd heard genuine concern in her voice in years. Not the performative kind, not the family reunion, holiday dinner kind. Real worry. I didn't answer right away. My eyes drifted to the corner of the room where the wallpaper curled at the seam. There was a dusty air conditioner groaning through weak airflow and a crack in the ceiling shaped like a crooked branch. Daniel, she said again, quieter. I'm fine, I said, finally. My voice sounded foreign, detached, like it belonged to someone I used to be. We didn't realize you were so upset. Mom's freaking out. Dad's trying to call you. I saw, I said flatly. Maddie paused. There was a long silence, like she didn't know what to say next. I could hear muffled voices behind her, like she was standing in the kitchen at home on speakerphone and someone, probably Mom, was hovering nearby, coaching her on what to say. We're sorry, she finally offered. It wasn't meant to be personal. We just thought you weren't the type to care about birthdays. I let out a dry laugh. Right. Because I never complain, I must not care. No, that's not what I meant, she said quickly. It's just, you've always been the easy one. That word again. Easy. It grated now more than ever. Like my entire identity had been boiled down to how little I demanded. How little I cost them emotionally. You know what's funny? I said, my voice calm but tight. I was easy because I thought it would earn me love. Not special treatment, just basic acknowledgement. A phone call. A cake I actually liked. But I guess being easy just made me invisible. She didn't reply right away. I heard a chair scrape across the floor. Then she said, they're scared, Dan. Mom keeps saying she didn't mean it like that. That she thought you understood. Yeah, I said, I understood. I always have. And then I hung up. I didn't throw the phone or cry or do anything dramatic. I just set the receiver down and stood there, letting the moment breathe. The weight in my chest hadn't lifted, but it had shifted, like I'd taken back something I didn't realize had been stolen from me. Agency. The rest of that night passed in a fog. I took a long shower under lukewarm water, dried off with scratchy towels, and stared at myself in the mirror longer than I probably ever had. I didn't look angry. I just looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, like someone who'd spent too many years running a marathon for a prize that was never going to be handed to him. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 56 notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, text ranging from please just talk to us to why are you being so dramatic? The group chat had gone from confused to desperate to defensive in a matter of hours. My mom's last message was a picture of the sheet cake, now fully eaten, with the caption, it wasn't that bad, was it? That's what broke me again, not the callousness, but the cluelessness. She didn't get it. None of them did. It wasn't about the cake. It was about years of feeling like a placeholder in my own family. Like a utility. A spare. So I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and booked a week at a cabin I found online. Remote, quiet, no Wi-Fi. Just woods, a lake, and enough space to think. I texted my boss that I needed a break for personal reasons. He replied within minutes, more supportive than my entire family had ever been. Take all the time you need. Seriously. On my drive up, I passed a scenic overlook and decided on impulse to pull over. The valley below stretched out like a painting, golden trees, early morning mist, the kind of silence that didn't ask anything from you. I sat on the hood of my car, sipping gas station coffee, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel like I had to be anywhere. Didn't feel like someone's emotional crutch. Didn't feel forgotten. That was when my phone buzzed again. Just one message. From Lucas. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I was always told you didn't like attention. I didn't realize they made you invisible. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because it fixed anything, but because, for once, it wasn't deflection. It wasn't an excuse. It was honest. Raw. Like he'd taken off the filter we all wore in that house. But before I could decide how I felt about it, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. We need to talk. Your father and I are getting very worried. You've made your point. Now come home. Made my point. Like this was all just a tantrum. I turned off the phone, and that's when I saw the sign on the side of the road, cabin retreat, 5 miles ahead. I turned the wheel, gravel crunching beneath the tires, and headed down the narrow road. The cabin was tucked away in the woods, just off a winding gravel path that disappeared behind a row of old pine trees. It looked like something out of a forgotten postcard, weathered timber walls, a stone chimney, and a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze. The key was exactly where the owner said it would be, under a chipped ceramic frog beside the steps. No keypad, no cameras. Just trust and silence. It felt strange, being somewhere that didn't expect anything of me. Inside, the place was simple but warm. Worn rugs, a brick fireplace, a stack of old books with dog-eared pages. There was no TV, no Wi-Fi, and only one bar of service if I stood exactly at the edge of the porch. The fridge was stocked with basics, and a handwritten note welcomed me. Sometimes you just need to disappear for a while. Hope this helps. Janice. I didn't unpack right away. I just stood in the middle of the room, letting the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. No one calling my name. No obligations. No tension riding in the air, waiting to pop with one wrong question. I sank into the armchair by the window and stared out at the woods until the sun dipped behind the trees. That night, I lit a fire, made some tea, and started reading a paperback someone had left behind. I don't even remember what it was. What I do remember is how strange it felt to feel still. By the second day, I stopped checking my phone. I left it turned off in the drawer. Every now and then I'd feel the phantom vibration in my pocket, reach for it out of habit, then remind myself I didn't owe anyone anything right now, not even an explanation. I took walks through the trails, cooked my own meals, sat on the porch for hours just listening to birds and wind and the occasional rustle of deer moving through the trees. And in that quiet, I started to hear myself again. Not the version of me my family had shaped, not the easy one, the quiet one, the emotional sponge, but me. Memories came back in fragments. Like the time I won the regional science fair in 9th grade and Mom missed the award ceremony because she was picking up Lucas from baseball practice. Or my high school graduation dinner that turned into an impromptu celebrate Lucas's summer internship party because he got an email on the way to the restaurant. Or the Christmas I gave everyone personalized gifts and got a re-gifted coffee mug with someone else's name scratched off the bottom. I told myself those things didn't matter, that I was strong enough not to need validation. But I realized now it wasn't about the gestures, it was about being seen. About feeling like I was part of something, not just orbiting around it. On the 4th morning, I woke up to find a folded piece of paper slid under the cabin door. No name, just a message. I drove 5 hours to see you. I didn't tell anyone. I'm parked at the old overlook. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I'll wait an hour. Then I'll leave. Lucas. I held the note for a long time, staring at the words like they were written in another language. I hadn't expected him to come. He was the golden boy, the one who always stayed comfortably in the center of everyone's attention. Driving 5 hours to sit at an overlook? That didn't sound like him. Part of me wanted to crumple the note and throw it into the fire, to keep the boundary clean and simple. But another part of me, the one still tethered to the family I once hoped could change, needed to know what he had to say. So I grabbed my coat and headed down the dirt road. The overlook was exactly where I'd last seen it, an open stretch of earth where the cliff dropped off into miles of untouched forest. And there he was, leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, pacing in that nervous way he used to before a big exam. When he saw me, he stopped, didn't smile, just watched me approach like I was a deer that might bolt if he moved too fast. Hey, he said. I stopped a few feet away. You drove all the way out here? He nodded. Yeah, I figured if I didn't come to you, I'd probably never see you again. The wind picked up, rustling the branches behind us. I waited, arms crossed, heart thudding, not with anger, but anticipation. I didn't know what I wanted him to say. I only knew that it had to be real. I didn't know, he said. Not really. I mean, I knew things were always more about me, but I didn't realize how much it hurt you. I just thought, you were good, that you didn't need it, that you were above all that. I looked out at the trees. And what gave you that idea? He swallowed. Mom, Dad, everyone. They said you were the mature one, the strong one, that you didn't want to fuss. So I believed them. But after your birthday, after you left, I started thinking about all the times you were there for everyone. Every party, every emergency. You always showed up. But I don't remember anyone showing up for you. Not once. His voice cracked a little at the end. I turned to face him fully. They didn't even get the cake flavor right, I said quietly. He gave a weak smile. I saw the picture. I told Mom you hate chocolate. She said it was on sale. Of course it was. Lucas stepped closer, just enough to bridge the space between us without crowding me. I'm not asking you to come back, he said. I don't think you should. Not until, or unless, they change. But I want to. I want to be better. I know that's not enough. I needed you to know I see you now. And I'm sorry it took this long. I didn't reply right away. Just stood there, feeling the weight of all those years hang between us like fog. Then I said, you said you'd wait an hour. He looked confused for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I'll walk with you, I said. Just for a little bit. Don't talk. Just walk. And we did. Down a trail that looped back toward the woods, the path quiet except for our footsteps. Neither of us knew if this was a start or a goodbye. But it was the first time I didn't feel invisible standing next to him. And just as we reached the halfway point of the trail, I saw something up ahead. Lucas stopped when I did. His brow furrowed. What is it? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the thing half buried in the woods ahead of us, an old wooden bench, worn and moss-covered, clearly forgotten. But it wasn't the bench that caught my attention. It was the plaque. A small, tarnished rectangle of metal had been nailed to the backrest. I stepped closer, brushing off the layer of dirt and leaves. The inscription read, "In memory of those who were always there, but rarely seen." My throat tightened. I didn't believe in signs. I wasn't the type to read cosmic meaning into rusty benches in the middle of nowhere. But in that moment, I couldn't ignore how perfectly it captured everything I'd felt for 27 years. I sat down slowly, the wood creaking under me, and gestured for Lucas to do the same. He hesitated, then lowered himself beside me, quiet. "You know," I said, after a long silence, "I always thought that being useful would make people love me. I thought if I stayed out of the way, didn't ask for anything, helped when they needed it, they'd appreciate me. That one day, someone would say, 'Daniel's the reason we got through this.' He mattered. But all it ever did was teach them I didn't need anything, that I could be ignored." Lucas didn't try to argue. That was new. Instead, he said, "I think we all let you carry too much." "Because we could." "Yeah," I said. "You could." He picked at the moss growing on the bench's edge. "I used to think being the center of attention meant I was more loved. But now I see that all it did was make me dependent. On you. On Mom and Dad. Everyone catered to me, but I never learned how to stand on my own. I always had someone holding the net. You never did. And still, you never let me fall." I looked over at him. "I don't regret catching you. I regret that no one caught me." That's when his eyes welled up. Not performative, not crocodile tears. Just a man realizing, too late, what someone else had been carrying for far too long. "You deserve more than an apology," he said. "You deserve a family that shows up." I stood. "You're right. But I'm done waiting for that to happen. I'm not going back to fix them. I'm not stepping into that house again just to be forgotten by the next birthday." "Then what happens now?" he asked. I looked out at the trees. The wind had picked up, cool and sharp. I could feel the direction it was blowing, pushing me forward, not back. "I start over," I said. "Without them." I didn't drive home. I drove to an apartment complex an hour outside the city, where a friend from college had offered to let me stay short-term. No questions, no lectures. Just a key, a room, and the space I needed. I signed up for a therapy session the next day, my first in years. Told them I needed help with boundaries, with anger, with rebuilding after a lifetime of playing support in everyone else's story. A week later, I started job hunting. Not because I needed money, I had some savings, enough to get by, but because I wanted ownership over my next chapter. I applied to positions I'd always talked myself out of, ones I thought were too bold or too selfish. I stopped being modest in interviews. I talked about my strengths, my leadership, my resilience. Turns out, being the emotional rock of a dysfunctional family makes you damn good at problem solving. The calls from my parents kept coming, of course. Some were laced with guilt. "We were just trying to give Lucas a special day." Others tried manipulation. "You've always been so sensitive." And eventually, desperation. "We didn't know you'd take it this far." I didn't respond to any of them. They hadn't reached out when I needed support. Not when I moved out. Not when I graduated. Not when I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with pneumonia 3 years ago, and they didn't even visit because it was too far. But now that I'd finally said no, now they noticed. Funny how that works. Lucas texted me once a week. Never too much. Just updates. Proof he was trying. He told me he confronted our parents, that things got ugly. That Mom called him ungrateful. That Dad said I was punishing them. But Lucas stood his ground. Said he wouldn't play along anymore. Said if they couldn't see the problem, maybe it was time they sat alone for a while. For a while, I didn't know if I believed him. But then one afternoon, I got a delivery at the apartment. A small package, no return address. Inside was a birthday card. Handwritten. Not from Hallmark. Not signed, "Love, the family." Just a single line, in Lucas's handwriting. "I see you. And I'll keep showing up, even if no one else does." I didn't cry. I just smiled, set it on the windowsill, and left it there. 3 months later, I was offered a position as a community project manager for a nonprofit. It was everything I wanted: purpose, independence, a chance to build something on my terms. The office was in a renovated firehouse, the kind with exposed brick and a view of the city skyline. On my first day, I walked in wearing a navy blue button-up and a watch I bought for myself. Not a gift. Not a hand-me-down. Mine. I passed by the break room where someone had left out cupcakes. Daniel, right? A coworker said, smiling. They're for your first day. We always do something for new hires. I blinked. Seriously? Of course, she said. We celebrate people around here. And I believed her. That night, I called Lucas. He picked up on the second ring. I got the job, I said. You serious? Yeah. I'm proud of you, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. There was a pause, and then I asked, how are things at home? He exhaled. Rough. Mom's still playing the victim. Dad won't admit anything. But I'm not letting it go. I told them if they want a relationship with me, they need to fix how they treat you. They said that's manipulative. I said, no, it's loyalty. I chuckled. You sure you're not adopted? He laughed too. I might be. Listen, I said, you're not responsible for fixing them. I'm not either. I appreciate you trying. You're my brother, he said. I should have started a lot sooner. We hung up after making plans to meet in person the next week. No pressure. Just a coffee. Neutral ground. I went to bed that night with the windows open and the city lights glowing against the ceiling. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like a spare part in someone else's life. I felt like the main character in mine. And that, finally, was enough. I never thought my own sister would use my surgery recovery as a free babysitting opportunity, but that's exactly what happened. My name's Barney. I'm 33, and a few months ago, I went through one of the most exhausting and eye-opening experiences of my life. It started with something small, like most family dramas do. My sister, Melissa, had always been intense. Growing up, she was the kind of person who believed the world owed her a favor. If she wanted something, she'd find a way to make it your problem. My parents called it her strong personality. I called it what it really was, entitlement, wrapped in fake charm and guilt trips. I just had surgery on my lower back. It wasn't something minor, either. I'd been having problems for years after a work accident, and finally, my doctor told me I needed to get it fixed before it caused permanent nerve damage. The operation went fine, but recovery was brutal. I could barely get up without feeling like someone was stabbing my spine with a crowbar. I lived alone in a small apartment and had stocked up on frozen meals, snacks, and pain meds to make it through the next few weeks. My plan was simple: heal, rest, and stay off my feet as much as possible. Then, 3 days after the surgery, while I was still shuffling around like a 90-year-old, I got a text from Melissa. Hey, Barney. Quick question. You can watch my kids for a week, right? I just booked a trip to Paris. At first, I thought she was joking. I even laughed, then stopped when I realized she wasn't following up with a just kidding. So I typed, Melissa, I just had back surgery. I can barely walk. I can't babysit. She replied almost instantly. Oh, come on. You're just sitting around anyway. They're easy kids. You'll love having company. Her easy kids were a 7-year-old who screamed when he didn't get his way and a 5-year-old who thought walls were coloring books. And that company she mentioned? It usually meant chaos, broken things, and zero sleep. I told her no again, more firmly this time, explaining I wasn't even allowed to lift more than 5 pounds. She didn't reply for an hour. Then I got another message. I already paid for the tickets. Non-refundable. Please don't make this harder for me. You know I need a break. That line, you know I need a break, made my blood boil. Melissa always needed a break. From what exactly? She had a husband, a house, a part-time job. She worked maybe 2 days a week, and our parents still helped with the bills. Meanwhile, I was recovering from major surgery, and she somehow thought this was a convenient time for me to become her backup nanny. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. Instead, I got a voicemail from her husband, Derek, who sounded nervous. Hey man, Melissa said you could help us out next week. We really appreciate it. She's been stressed. You know how she gets. The kids will behave, I promise. I called him back, but it went to voicemail. I left one saying, no, I can't. I'm not physically able to. Please figure something else out. I thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, I woke up to knocking. Persistent, loud, and coming from my front door. I dragged myself up with my cane, still groggy and in pain, and opened it, only to see Melissa standing there, sunglasses on, a bright pink suitcase beside her, and her 2 kids holding stuffed animals. Surprise, she said, like she was doing me a favor. I knew you'd say yes once you saw their cute faces. I just stood there, stunned. Melissa, what are you doing? I told you, Paris. You'll be fine, Barney. The kids have snacks and their tablets. They're low maintenance. You just have to make sure they don't kill each other. She pushed the suitcase into my apartment before I could protest. Melissa, I can't even bend down without pain. I told you this. She waved a hand. You're exaggerating. You always are. You'll be fine. You're just sitting around anyway. Melissa, I'm serious. I physically can't do this. Her smile faded slightly. Don't guilt trip me, Barney. You know I never get time for myself. Derek said it was fine. Derek said what? And before I could finish, she hugged the kids, told them to be good for Uncle Barney, and literally walked out the door. I stood there, mouth open, as her car pulled away. That first night was a disaster. I couldn't get up fast enough when the kids started fighting over a tablet. One of them spilled juice on my couch, and when I tried to clean it, I pulled at my stitches by accident. The pain was so bad I had to sit on the floor for 10 minutes until it passed. The next morning, I called Melissa. No answer. I texted her. You need to come back. I'm not joking. She read it. Thank you. Read receipts, but didn't respond. I even tried calling Derek, who sent me a single message. I'm sorry, man. She's already on the plane. I felt helpless, angry, betrayed. This wasn't just inconsiderate. It was cruel. Who dumps their kids on someone recovering from surgery and flies to another continent? Over the next few days, my apartment turned into a war zone. The kids were bored, loud, and endlessly demanding. The older one, Max, kept sneaking snacks and leaving wrappers everywhere. The younger one, Lily, had a meltdown every time I told her no. I tried my best, but I was running on painkillers, exhaustion, and frustration. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something crashing in the kitchen. Max had tried to climb onto the counter to get cookies and knocked over a glass. I yelled, not because I was angry at him, but because the noise scared me so badly my back spasmed. I had to sit there, gripping the edge of the couch, while he stared at me with wide eyes. I felt terrible afterward. I wasn't mad at the kid. This was all Melissa's fault. By day 4, I could barely keep up. I had a follow-up appointment scheduled, but I couldn't even get there because I had no one to watch the kids. I ended up missing it, and my doctor's office called to check in. When I told them what happened, the nurse said, "That's unacceptable. You need to be resting." Yeah, tell that to my sister. On day 5, I called my parents. They lived a few hours away, and I figured maybe they could help. When I told them everything, my mom sighed. "Oh, Barney, you know how your sister is. She just needs a break." A break? From what? I snapped. From manipulating people? Don't talk about your sister that way, my mom scolded. She's had a rough few years. Rough? She'd been to Cancun last summer. She had a live-in babysitter for 6 months. And somehow, I was the one they always told to be more understanding. That's when something inside me clicked. For the first time in a long time, I realized just how much Melissa had gotten away with, because everyone let her. I'd been the easy one, the dependable one. The brother who'd drive across town to fix her sink, help her move furniture, or pick up her kids when she was too tired. But not this time. As the week went on, I started planning. Not impulsively, but carefully. I knew Melissa was counting on me being the same pushover I'd always been. She thought she could just dump her responsibilities and come home to everything neatly taken care of. But this time, she was going to learn what consequences felt like. And when she walked through that door after her trip, she'd walk into a scene she'd never forget. But I wasn't ready. I needed to wait, watch, and make sure she understood just how far she'd pushed me. Because if she wanted to treat me like a doormat, she was about to find out that even doormats can flip over. By the 3rd day, I'd stopped trying to rationalize anything Melissa did. Every time I picked up my phone and saw a new photo of her smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower or sipping wine by the Seine, my stomach turned. Meanwhile, I was here, lying on a heating pad, praying the painkillers would kick in while her kids argued over which cartoon to watch. At first, I told myself to just endure it until she got back. But as the days went on, something shifted. It wasn't just the physical pain. It was the quiet realization that this had always been my role in the family. The one who picked up the slack. The one who forgave. The one who got the short end of the stick, smiled, and said, "It's fine." Melissa had always been that way. Even when we were kids. I remember once in high school when she borrowed my car for a quick errand and returned it 2 days later with an empty tank and a dent in the bumper. She cried, told my parents it was an accident, and somehow I ended up apologizing for overreacting. That's the kind of dynamic we had. And our parents, well, they never saw it. Or maybe they did and just didn't want to deal with the drama. Now, here I was again, barely able to walk, and Melissa had dumped her life on me without a second thought. And what made it worse was the silence. No check-ins, no messages asking how I was doing. Just a few social media posts of her finally living life again. I wasn't even mad at her kids. They were just being kids. I was furious at her. It was late afternoon when my phone rang again. I picked it up, hoping maybe she was finally calling to apologize. But no, it was Mom. "Barney," she said in that tone that always meant I was about to be guilt-tripped. "I heard from Melissa that you were being difficult." I almost dropped the phone. Difficult? I'm recovering from surgery, and she abandoned her kids here. What exactly am I being difficult about? Mom sighed like I was missing something obvious. "You know how your sister gets. She's under a lot of stress. Derek's been working extra hours, and she needed some time for herself. Can't you just make it work? It's only a few more days." I clenched my jaw. "Mom, I'm not a daycare center. I'm on medication strong enough to make me dizzy half the day. I could fall and hurt myself trying to take care of them." "Oh, Barney," she said softly, "you always exaggerate things. You were walking fine the last time I saw you." "That was before they cut into my spine, Mom." I snapped. There was a pause. "You don't have to raise your voice," she said coldly. "I just thought you'd want to help your sister. Family looks out for each other." That phrase, "family looks out for each other," hit differently when it only ever applied to one side. I'd been looking out for them my whole life. Who was looking out for me? When I hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall. My head was pounding, my back ached, and my apartment looked like a storm had torn through it. There were cereal crumbs in the carpet, toys scattered everywhere, and the faint smell of grape juice that I'd already tried scrubbing out twice. I felt completely invisible, like I could be lying on the floor unconscious and Melissa would still text, "Hey, can you water my plants too?" That night, things escalated. Max decided he wanted pizza for dinner, but I didn't have the strength to cook or drive. I offered him a frozen one, but he said, "Mom says frozen food is gross." When I told him it was either that or nothing, he stomped off to his room, slammed the door, and shouted, "You're the worst uncle ever." Normally, I'd shrug that off. He's 7, after all, but I was at my breaking point. My chest tightened, and I could feel that kind of frustration where you just want to yell into a pillow. Lily started crying because her brother scared her, and now I had 2 upset kids, a throbbing back, and a headache that felt like nails being driven into my skull. I took a deep breath and texted Derek again. "This is out of control. I need you to figure something out. I can't keep doing this." He replied 10 minutes later with, "I'm sorry, man. She won't let me change the tickets. Please just hold out. I'll make it up to you." Make it up to me? What? With another voicemail apology and a gift card. I stared at the message for a long time, wondering how a grown man could be so powerless in his own marriage. Derek had always been the quiet type, the kind who just nodded while Melissa talked over him. But even so, I couldn't believe he was really letting this happen. The next day, I woke up to chaos again. Max had spilled milk on my rug and was using one of my shirts to wipe it up. Lily was crying because she couldn't find her stuffed bunny, which, as it turned out, was floating in the toilet. I didn't even have the energy to be angry anymore. I just sat on the edge of my couch, staring blankly, feeling that mix of pain and disbelief. That's when my neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, knocked on the door. She's an older woman, probably in her 70s, and one of the few people in the building who actually talks to me. "Oh, Barney dear," she said, peering inside. "Are you all right? I keep hearing little footsteps all night." I sighed. "Melissa's kids. She's in Paris." "Paris?" she repeated, like she couldn't believe it. "And she left you with them? You're supposed to be resting. Tell me about it," I muttered. She stepped in carefully, looking around the mess. "Oh, sweetheart, this isn't right. You need rest, not this madness. Why don't I watch them for a few hours so you can nap?" I almost cried from relief. "You do that?" "Of course, but only because your sister clearly lost her mind." For the first time in days, I slept without interruption. When I woke up, the apartment was quieter, and Mrs. Holloway had left a note saying she'd taken the kids to the playground. She even wrote, "They're good kids, just need someone firm." That note stuck in my head. Someone firm. Maybe that was the key. I'd spent years giving Melissa and her kids the benefit of the doubt, being the nice one, thinking it would eventually make her treat me better. But all it ever did was reinforce her belief that she could do anything and get away with it. That evening, I decided to call Melissa again. Predictably, she didn't answer, but I left a message. Melissa, it's me. You have until tomorrow morning to figure something out. I can't do this anymore. If you don't, I'm calling someone else to take them. I'm serious. The next morning, I got her reply, a series of texts that made my jaw drop. Wow, Barney. Really? You're going to abandon your niece and nephew? You always make everything about you. I thought you loved them. Then another one. If something happens to them, it'll be on you. And the cherry on top, you're selfish. You could have helped me for once. I stared at the screen, shaking with anger. For once. I had driven her to the airport twice before, babysat during her date nights, even paid one of her credit card bills when she was short on cash. And now she had the nerve to call me selfish? I didn't respond. Instead, I sat there and let the anger simmer, not in an impulsive way, but in a slow, deliberate burn that started to crystallize into something else. Something more focused. Later that day, I got another call from my mom. Barney, your sister says you're threatening to abandon the kids, she said, sounding horrified. Threatening? No, just telling the truth. I can't take care of them. Barney, please don't make this worse. Melissa's very upset. You know she's sensitive. Sensitive? She's sipping wine in Paris while I'm on painkillers trying to stop her son from sticking forks in electrical sockets. Don't exaggerate, Mom said again. That word. Exaggerate. She said it like a reflex, every time I tried to explain how bad things really were. I felt something inside me snap, not in a loud or dramatic way, but quietly, like a final click of realization. They were never going to take my side. Not once. Because in their eyes, Melissa was the one who needed to be protected, coddled, and excused. I was just the fallback plan. After that call, I stopped trying to convince anyone. I knew I'd have to handle this myself. But instead of reacting in anger, I decided to wait. I wanted Melissa to walk into the mess she'd created. I wanted her to feel the weight of her own decisions. For the next 2 days, I did only what was necessary. I fed the kids, kept them safe, and made sure the place didn't burn down. But I stopped cleaning up after them. Stopped picking up toys or wiping every spill. Stopped pretending everything was fine. I let the natural consequences of neglect pile up, slowly, quietly. And as I watched the apartment descend into the chaos she'd left behind, I started to plan exactly how I'd make her face it. Because when she walked back through that door, she wasn't just coming home from Paris. She was walking straight into a lesson I'd been waiting my whole life to teach her. And I was going to make sure she remembered it. By the time the week was almost over, I was counting the hours until Melissa's flight home. I'd reached that point of exhaustion where even being angry felt like too much effort. My body hurt, my head hurt, and the apartment looked like a scene out of a disaster movie. But I kept reminding myself, just one more day. Then, the betrayal happened. The kind that makes your stomach twist, not because you're surprised, but because deep down, you knew it was coming. Melissa texted the morning of her supposed return. Hey, small change of plans. We decided to extend the trip by 3 more days. Paris is too amazing to leave just yet. Don't hate me. I stared at that message for a solid minute, blinking in disbelief. My hands actually started shaking. She didn't even ask. Didn't even pretend to ask. She just told me she was staying longer, like my life was a pause button she could hit whenever she wanted. I typed back slowly, trying to keep my composure. Melissa, no, I can't keep watching them. I'm in pain. You need to come home. She replied with a selfie of her in front of the Louvre, followed by, relax. Derek said it's fine. He'll send you some money for food or whatever. You're doing great, Uncle Barney. Money. Like that would fix the fact that I could barely stand without wincing. Like that would make up for the sleep I'd lost, the appointment I'd missed, or the sheer disrespect of being treated like a free, disposable babysitter. That's when it hit me. She had no intention of taking responsibility. None. In her mind, I wasn't her brother anymore. I was staff. I called Derek immediately, my patience gone. He picked up after a few rings, sounding anxious. Hey, Barney. Listen, I tried talking to her. She won't listen to me. Won't listen. I snapped. She left me with your kids for over a week, and now she's extending her trip? You need to get her home, Derek. He hesitated. She said if I make a big deal out of it, she'll cancel our credit card. She already used it for the hotel. I can't afford another fight with her. I was speechless. I actually pressed the phone to my forehead for a moment, trying to process the absurdity of what he'd just said. My sister had her husband so tied up in guilt and control that he couldn't even stand up to her while she was abandoning her own children. Derek, I said quietly, you realize this is neglect, right? I could call someone. I know, he whispered. But please don't. She'll lose it. Just, please hold on a bit longer. I hung up without another word. I didn't trust myself to speak. My entire chest felt heavy, like someone was pressing down on it. That afternoon, while the kids napped, I sat in the dim living room, staring at the mess around me. I thought about all the times I'd helped Melissa. The time she called me crying because her car battery died in the middle of the night. The time I gave her half my savings when she needed help with her mortgage. The holidays I spent alone because she needed mom and dad that year. Every single memory now felt like a knife twisted between my ribs. Because it wasn't just that she'd left me in pain, it was that she didn't care. Not even a little. That evening, I checked her social media again. She'd just posted a photo at a fancy restaurant, captioned, "Finally getting the relaxation I deserve." The comments were full of her friends cheering her on, calling her such a hard-working mom who needed a break. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the app open for a moment, then set the phone down, staring at the reflection of the dim TV screen. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. And then, for the first time, I said it out loud. She doesn't deserve any of this. Not Paris. Not pity. Not me cleaning up her messes anymore. It wasn't said in anger. It was said with a cold kind of clarity. The kind that comes after you've finally stopped making excuses for someone. That night, I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Every few minutes, I replayed her messages in my head, her tone, her dismissiveness. By 2 a.m., I was sitting on the couch with a notebook in my hand, scribbling down ideas, not out of spite, but strategy. Because Melissa wasn't just going to waltz back in and pretend this never happened. No, when she came home, she was going to walk into something she wouldn't forget. But before I could even finalize what I'd do, I got one more blow, a call from Mom. "Barney," she said sternly, "your sister told me you threatened to call social services. Is that true?" I hesitated. I said I might, because she abandoned her kids. Mom's voice sharpened. "Don't you dare, Barney. That would destroy her reputation. You'd be tearing this family apart over a little misunderstanding." "A little misunderstanding?" I repeated slowly. "Mom, she left her kids with someone on medical leave and ran off to Paris. She just needed time. You've always been so dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. So if I collapsed here from pain, would that still be dramatic? Stop being ridiculous. You always make yourself the victim. And that was it. The moment the last string of trust snapped. The moment I realized it wasn't just Melissa who didn't value me. It was my entire family dynamic. They'd rather protect her comfort than acknowledge my pain. When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long while. The kids were asleep, the apartment dark except for the faint light from the street. My back throbbed, but I barely noticed. I was too focused. That was the night I stopped being the forgiving brother. I wasn't sure how yet. But when Melissa came home from Paris, she was going to see what happened when the person she underestimated finally stopped playing nice. The next morning started like every other, quiet at first, then loud enough to make my head pound. The kids woke up arguing over cereal again. I moved slower than usual. Every motion sent a dull ache down my back. I caught my reflection in the kitchen window and barely recognized myself. My eyes were sunken, and I looked like I hadn't slept in weeks. Because I hadn't. I didn't say much to them that morning. I just went through the motions. Made breakfast, picked up spilled milk, cleaned what I could, and then sat on the couch to catch my breath. The pain had gotten worse since the surgery. I was supposed to be resting, walking a little each day, building up strength, but instead, I was limping around, picking up toys and carrying plates I wasn't supposed to touch. Every night, I went to bed feeling like my body was made of fire. And every morning I woke up with the same thought running through my head. She doesn't care. She really doesn't care. Melissa hadn't called once since she'd extended her trip. Not one check-in. No questions about how I was managing, how my recovery was going, or whether I needed anything. The only texts I got were shallow updates, photos of her sightseeing, captions like "dream come true," or "finally living my best life." The more she posted, the more I realized she wasn't just selfish. She was proud of it. And maybe that was what broke me a little. Not the exhaustion or the pain, but the sheer indifference. I wasn't her brother anymore. I was just a convenient, disposable favor. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I tried lying flat, then on my side, then with a pillow under my knees like the doctor suggested, but nothing helped. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and shuffled to the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water. The apartment was quiet, except for the sound of the refrigerator humming. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, completely alone. I thought about calling someone, anyone, just to talk. But who? My friends had their own lives. My parents were clearly on Melissa's side, and my sister, the person who should have cared the most, was off drinking wine in a foreign country. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about babysitting. This was about years of letting people cross my boundaries. Years of letting Melissa take advantage of my kindness. Years of letting my parents guilt me into silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dark window. And I decided something. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I wasn't even going to argue anymore. I was done with all of it. The next morning, I started taking small steps, literally and figuratively. I made myself get dressed properly, even though my back screamed at me. I wrote down a list of everything Melissa had done, the days, the calls, the texts, every message, every ignored plea. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it yet, but I knew it mattered. That list became something of an anchor for me, a way to keep my head straight. Every time I felt angry or hopeless, I'd add another detail. Day 9, she still hasn't called. Day 10, Mom said I'm being dramatic again. It sounds silly, but writing it down gave me a sense of control. For once, I was keeping score. The kids noticed something was off, too. I wasn't yelling, wasn't sighing as much. I was just quiet. And weirdly, that made them behave a little better. Maybe they sensed it, the exhaustion, the tension. One night, Max even sat next to me and said, "Mom always says you're the nice uncle." I smiled faintly. She says that. Yeah, she said you never say no to her. That one sentence landed like a punch to the chest. You never say no to her. It explained everything. The guilt trips, the manipulation, the way she always assumed I'd bend. I taught her that I'd never say no. Later that evening, after putting them to bed, I went online and looked at my messages again. I read through everything, from her first text about Paris to her smug, "Don't hate me" update. And for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt clear. Every lie, every guilt trip, every manipulation, it was all there in writing. I realized something else too. Melissa wasn't the only one who needed to learn a lesson. My parents did too. For years they'd brushed off her behavior, telling me to be patient and not make things worse. But this wasn't patience. It was submission disguised as peacekeeping. So I started documenting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, even photos of my medication and my doctor's instructions about no lifting or bending. I wasn't planning revenge out of pettiness. I was preparing for accountability. Still, that didn't make the days any easier. I was physically falling apart. The pain was worse than before the surgery. The doctor's office kept calling to reschedule the appointment I'd missed, but I didn't have the energy to explain. The kids were starting to ask when their mom was coming home, and I didn't know what to tell them. By day 11, I was running on fumes. My back was swollen, I was dizzy most of the time, and the house smelled like old food and spilled juice no matter how many times I cleaned. I'd stopped cooking entirely and just gave the kids simple snacks. One afternoon, I nearly fell trying to pick up a spilled box of crayons. My knees gave out, and I landed hard, catching myself against the couch. It scared me. Not just the pain, but the realization that if I actually got hurt again, no one would even know for days. That night, I texted Derek again, short and blunt. "If Melissa doesn't come home tomorrow, I'm calling child services. I'm done." He didn't respond right away. But about an hour later, I saw the 3 dots typing, and then they vanished. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Finally, at midnight, he replied, "Please don't do that. She'll never forgive me." I stared at the message and felt something break completely. She'll never forgive me. Not, she'll never forgive herself. Not, you're right, I'll fix this. Just fear. Fear of her wrath. I realized then that Derek wasn't a coward. He was a prisoner. Just like I'd been for years, trapped by guilt and obligation. That was when I decided I wouldn't be trapped anymore. The next morning, I called the airline Melissa had used, Her ticket confirmation was in one of her texts. I pretended to be her, explaining that I needed to check on a reservation. The agent confirmed her flight details. She wasn't coming home that day. She'd extended her stay for an extra 5 nights. 5 more nights. That was it. That was my limit. I hung up and sat there in silence for a long time. The kids were in the other room watching TV, oblivious. And as I listened to their laughter, something inside me settled. Not anger this time, but resolve. I wasn't going to yell or threaten anymore. I was done begging her to care. But I was going to make sure that when she finally walked through that door, she'd be forced to look at what she'd done. I started small, cleaning up the apartment, not to make it spotless, but to make it presentable. I packed her kids' things neatly into bags. Their toys, clothes, snacks. I placed everything by the door. Then I sat down with a notebook and wrote out a message to her. Calm, detailed, factual. No emotion, just truth. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do when she got back. Whether I'd confront her quietly or let her find out another way. But I knew one thing for certain. I was never going to let her put me in this position again. That night, for the first time since the surgery, I slept. Not peacefully, but deeply. Like my body finally realized I was taking my power back. I didn't know it yet, but that calm was the eye of the storm. Because when Melissa finally came home from Paris, she didn't walk into an apology. She walked into a reckoning. When Melissa finally came back from Paris, I didn't open the door right away. I heard her before I saw her, her voice echoing down the hallway, that same high-pitched tone she used when she wanted to sound cheerful, but in control. Kids, Mommy's home, she sang, dragging her suitcase behind her like she'd just returned from a business trip instead of a self-indulgent vacation that left me half-broken. She knocked, then banged. Barney? Come on, open up. I'm back. I took a slow breath, making sure my face showed nothing. No anger, no pain, no exhaustion. When I finally opened the door, she was standing there in a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses, looking like she'd stepped straight out of a travel magazine. She smelled faintly of perfume and airport coffee. Oh my gosh, she said, sweeping past me like she owned the place. You have no idea what Paris was like. Life-changing. I can't even describe it. I just stood there while she knelt down to hug her kids. They clung to her for a moment, then quickly pulled away to show her something on their tablets. Melissa smiled like she was the hero returning from war. Ah, you missed me so much, didn't you? Yeah, Max said flatly. Uncle Barney said you weren't coming back. Her smile froze for half a second, then returned. Oh, he was just joking, sweetie. I stayed silent, watching her take in the state of the apartment. It wasn't trashed, but it wasn't clean either, just enough to show the reality of what she'd left behind. A mountain of laundry, half-empty cereal boxes, toys scattered in corners. Melissa frowned slightly. Wow, you really let the place go, huh? That was it. No apology. No thank you. Just a comment about the mess she caused. Something in me shifted then. The old version of me would have made excuses, maybe even apologized. But not this time. I just looked at her calmly and said, You owe me $1,200. She blinked. What? That's what it cost me to miss work, reschedule my appointment, pay for groceries, and cover your kids while I was recovering from surgery. I documented everything. I handed her a neatly printed sheet I'd made the night before. Dates, times, receipts, and a total at the bottom. She laughed at first, like it was a joke. Barney, come on. You're being ridiculous. Family doesn't charge family. You're right, I said evenly. Family doesn't abandon someone right after spinal surgery either. Her face hardened. You're being dramatic again. I thought you'd understand how much I needed this. I've been so stressed. And you're single. You have all this free time. Free time, I repeated. Melissa, I couldn't even stand up straight some days. You left me with 2 kids while you went shopping in Paris. Her tone snapped. You don't get it. I needed to clear my head. And it's not like the kids were hurt. You always overreact to everything. I felt it then, this strange calm wash over me. Her words no longer stung. They just confirmed what I already knew. I'm not arguing with you, I said quietly. You can pay me back or deal with it another way. But either way, we're done. Don't ever ask me for help again. She rolled her eyes. Wow, so dramatic. You're seriously going to hold this over my head? No, I said, stepping aside so she could gather her things. I'm just done pretending we're close. And with that, I walked back to my room, leaving her standing there speechless for the first time in her life. That night, After they left, the apartment was quiet again. Completely still. I could finally breathe. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel obligated. I just felt free. The next few months were rough, but they were mine. I focused on recovering properly. I went back to my doctor, explained what had happened, and he was furious I'd been lifting and walking so much. He adjusted my medication, gave me a new physical therapy plan, and told me to take things slow. I did, and it worked. My body healed faster than expected. By spring, I was walking normally again, and by summer, I was back to work, stronger, more focused, and with a very different attitude. Something else happened too. I started setting boundaries. Real ones. When my parents called to ask if I'd make peace with Melissa, I said no. When they tried to guilt me with "she's still your sister," I said, "and I'm still her brother," but she forgot that first. That shut them up. For once, I didn't care about being the good son. I cared about being free. The more distance I put between myself and that toxic family dynamic, the more I realized how much space it had taken up in my life. I started saying yes to myself for a change. I started going out more, meeting new people, even taking small weekend trips. My life slowly began to feel like mine again. Meanwhile, Melissa's perfect little world started to crack. Derek called me once, nervously, as usual, to say they were having money problems. Apparently, Melissa had overspent in Paris. Big surprise. She'd been posting pictures of luxury shopping bags, fancy meals, private tours, all of it on their joint credit card. Now, she was scrambling to pay it off. I didn't gloat, but I won't lie, it felt satisfying to hear. Especially when he said, "She's been really different lately. Short-tempered. The kids mentioned how much fun they had with you, though." She didn't like that. Oh, I bet she didn't. One evening, a few weeks later, I got a message from her. Short. Cold. "Can you watch the kids this weekend? We're going out of town for Derek's work." I looked at the message for a long time, then simply replied, "No." Her response came instantly. "Why not?" I typed, "Because I said no. Remember? We're done." I could almost feel her frustration through the screen. For once, she wasn't getting her way. She sent a long paragraph about how ungrateful I was and how I'd changed. I didn't even read the whole thing. I just blocked her number. And let me tell you, that moment felt better than any revenge I could have planned. But here's the thing about standing up for yourself, it changes everything. People start seeing you differently. My parents eventually stopped trying to mediate. Derek stopped calling, probably too embarrassed. And I started building something better. By fall, I'd gotten a promotion at work. I was managing a new team, earning more than ever, and had finally saved enough to move to a new apartment. A bigger place, in a quieter neighborhood. It felt like a clean slate. Sometimes, when I unpacked or rearranged furniture, I'd think about how far I'd come. From lying helpless on a couch with 2 screaming kids to standing tall in my own home, debt-free, drama-free, and, most importantly, at peace. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was done carrying resentment for people who'd never carry anything for me. Still, every so often, I'd hear something about Melissa from someone, usually through Mom. "She's been having a rough time," Mom would say. "Things aren't easy for her right now." And I'd smile politely and say, "I'm sure they aren't." Because deep down, I knew karma wasn't done with her yet. And when it finally came around, I wasn't going to interfere. I'd just sit back, quietly, watching her world unravel, knowing I didn't have to lift a finger this time. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's living well enough that the people who wronged you have to watch from below. When I started writing everything down, I didn't imagine I'd actually use it as a weapon. I just needed the list to stop feeling like a broken record playing in my head. But once I had dates, screenshots, receipts, doctor's notes, and a timeline that made sense, it stopped being just a diary of hurt and started looking like a dossier. And dossiers do things, quiet, practical things that flip a table without anyone having to scream. First, I did the obvious. I kept healing. I went to PT, I followed doctor's orders, and I rebuilt my strength because there's nothing more useless in a fight than being incapacitated. While I did that, I quietly used the one resource Melissa had never bothered to check: paperwork. Flight confirmations showing she extended her stay, receipts proving she didn't need a break. She wanted luxury. Screenshots of her telling me to chill, next to photos of a private tour. The nurse's note that I'd missed a follow-up because I had no ride. The invoice from the groceries I bought because her kids wouldn't eat anything else. Everything was neat, time-stamped, and unemotional. No melodrama. Just numbers and dates. Then I started to think like someone who actually wants a result. Anger is loud, but it doesn't win court cases or change people's behavior. Evidence does. So I did something basic and surgical. I filed a small claims case for the $1,200 I'd listed. It wasn't petty. It was documented costs and lost wages from a week I was medically ordered to rest. I knew filing would rattle her. I also knew it was a legal, calm way to make her look at her actions without yelling at anyone. Before I filed, I sent her a final message. Not a rant, just a PDF with the receipts and the total. I gave her a week to pay. I framed it flatly. This is the cost of your choice to extend your trip while leaving your children with someone on medical leave. I would prefer not to litigate. That sentence made her angry the first time. It made her panic the second. Panic is louder than anger. When the week passed with no payment, the court summons was prepared. Serving papers is weirdly antiseptic. An office clerk slaps a stamp and a date on something, and suddenly the problem moves from family argument to legal reality. I had planned everything so carefully that when the hearing came, my case was straightforward. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I showed up with a folder, the printed timeline, photos of texts, receipts, and a note from my doctor about activity restrictions. The judge asked a few polite questions. Melissa sputtered about needing a break and stress and misunderstandings. The judge didn't need my story to be dramatic. He needed facts. Facts do an exhausting, steady job of outlasting excuses. When the judgment came in my favor, it was a small thing on paper, just a number and a line in a public record. But it had teeth. It's one thing to post a guilt-ridden story in a family chat, and another to have an actual legal document that says, plainly, someone owes you money because they abandoned their parental duties and caused you to incur documented expenses while on medical leave. Melissa wouldn't be able to sweep that under a rug with a guilty smile. But small claims was only part of the setup. I also used the human element, the social currency Melissa had always cared about. I crafted a concise, calm message and dropped it into the family group chat. No yelling, no theatrics. Just the PDF again and a single line. If anyone wants context before this goes public, call me. The chat that used to be a stream of oversharing and passive encouragement around Melissa's life suddenly went silent. My parents, who had reflexively defended her before, had to look at the receipts and the dates. My inbox filled with short messages, some apologetic, some awkward, some trying to thread a line between both daughters and sons. Silence is a form of pressure. Paperwork is another. Together they made breathing difficult for the first time. On her side. There was one more thing I did that I hadn't told anyone about. I called Derek and offered him a simple choice. He could either go to mediation with me. I'd pay for it, and we'd sort out reimbursement and a plan for the kids that didn't involve abandoning them mid-recovery, or I'd pursue the judgment and let the paperwork force his hand later. Credit checks, collections, the whole thing. He chose mediation. Mediation was the strangest part, because it exposed everything in a room without drama. Derek sat across from me, small and sheepish. Melissa, when she arrived, walked in like she still expected applause. The mediator read the short, factual summary, and then I listened while she talked herself into corners. When asked whether she'd considered asking for help before booking the extension, she said no. When asked whether she'd known I was recovering from spinal surgery, she admitted she'd skimmed my messages but assumed I'd be okay. There was no big apology, just excuses. But the mediator didn't need a performance. He needed a plan. He suggested structured payments and a vetted schedule that didn't lean on me again. I didn't want to humiliate her in public. I wanted boundaries and reparation for what had happened. So we signed a mediated agreement, a payment schedule, a commitment to family counseling, and, most important from my perspective, a clause that Melissa would not leave her kids in my care again without explicit written agreement and medical clearance. That clause felt like a small triumph. It was a protection order for the future, domestic and mundane, and probably the thing that mattered most. When she balked at the payment schedule, I activated the judgment. Banks and bills are better at creating consequences than family lectures. Suddenly, Melissa's frantic social posts quieted. The same friends who had praised her Paris trip started asking questions in comment threads about how she planned to pay off overspending. Derek started facing financial reality too. They argued more at home, and for the first time, the picture she'd painted for the world didn't match their bank statements. I'll be honest, it felt good. It felt surgical and clean. No screaming, no passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge, no melodramatic posts. Just leverage applied in small, effective ways. The entire operation took patience and restraint, things I'd found in a new rhythm of life. And the payoff was quiet but irreversible. A court record, a mediated agreement, and a family chat where the narrative had been corrected by evidence. But the final touch, the part that made it undeniably satisfying, was the way she reacted when she thought no one was watching. A week after mediation, while scrolling through neighborhood pages and message threads, I saw a flurry of whispers. Melissa had called my parents begging them to help her save face and offered to give up a big family plan she'd been pushing for. They refused. My mom sent me a screenshot of a draft apology Melissa had typed and then deleted. That draft, awkward, incomplete, and obviously written under pressure, was the sound of a person finally realizing that some favors are not infinite. I didn't gloat. Instead, I let it sit. Let the legal reality and the social pressure do their work. For once, the universe's scales were balanced in a quiet way, by rules and receipts and the tedious, slow grind of righting something that was wrong. I felt lighter, less resentful, more in control. I still had scars, literal and emotional, but they no longer felt like chains. And yet, revenge done doesn't always mean peace. The mediated agreement had the weight of legality, the judgment had teeth, and the family chat had a new, cautious tone. Melissa was carefully polite in person now, but I could see the wheels turning. People who have never been pushed tend to push back when they see boundaries. She had options, and some of them weren't pretty. I'd won the battle, but the war, if you wanted to call it that, had shifted into new territory. The quiet maneuvers, the reputational ripples, the possibilities of escalation that come from someone who finally feels backed into a corner. I found myself watching instead of acting, letting the consequences unfold, letting other people, Derek, my parents, the school, contend with the fallout. That restraint felt powerful. I'd worked, legally and calmly, to create a set of outcomes that didn't need me to be dramatic. I was already living better, and the legal victory only made living better easier. But the thing about people like Melissa is they don't always accept defeat gracefully. And I'd started to notice tiny, telltale signs. A passive-aggressive note from her left on my doorstep about respect. A deleted friend request followed by a new account that had strange, sympathetic comments under her posts, and a voicemail left in the dead of night from a number I didn't recognize that said, simply, "Be careful, Barney." That last message was the one that unsettled me. My revenge had been clean and legal and, by most measures, complete. But revenge is a conversation, not a sentence. I had set things in motion, and now I was watching the next moves. I'd learned to plan and act, to document and wait. I'd taken my power back without theatrics. Yet even as the satisfaction settled like dust, a part of me understood that the game wasn't over. People don't always fold when cornered, they adapt. So I started doing one more thing that had nothing to do with law or family chat. I tightened up my life in ways that mattered. Changing passwords, securing important documents, making sure the kids' schedules were officially documented with the school, and quietly telling Mrs. Holloway and a couple of neighbors we'd had mediation so they could corroborate if needed. I wasn't paranoid. I was prudent. Then, one afternoon, as I was making coffee in my new kitchen, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown email subject line that read, "We need to talk. Urgent." No name. No context. My heart did something stupid for a second, that old rush of adrenaline that used to make me react before thinking. I opened it. The email contained one line and a single attachment. The line read, "Before you think this is over, read what's attached." The attachment was a PDF. The file name alone, family_docs_final, made my throat go dry. I didn't open it immediately. I sat down, the coffee cooling beside me, and felt the odd, familiar mix of fear and clarity. I'd set the rules. I'd won in the way the world checks wins, courts, agreements, receipts. But now, it looked like something else was coming, and this time it wasn't the tidy kind of consequence I prepared for. I clicked the file. The attachment wasn't what I feared. It was worse in a quieter, more revealing way. Inside were scans of financial records, joint credit statements, and a letter Derek had written to the family court. He was filing for divorce. The letter was simple, almost heartbreakingly plain. He described the same patterns I'd lived through all my life. The emotional manipulation, the impulsive spending, the guilt trips, the way Melissa twisted everything to make herself the victim. He mentioned Paris, how she abandoned her kids without arranging proper care, how he hadn't even known she extended the trip until after she landed. He wrote that he'd been afraid to leave for years, but the hearing and the judgment against her woke him up. I sat there staring at the letter, the screen light flickering on my face. He wasn't writing to me, but in a way, it felt like he was finishing my sentence for me, the one I'd started when I decided enough was enough. Within a month, word spread quietly through the family. My mom called one evening, her voice small and trembling. "Barney, your sister's marriage is falling apart. Derek's filing for full custody." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, softly, "I hope the kids end up with someone who puts them first." "She's devastated," Mom murmured. "She says everyone turned against her." "Everyone didn't turn against her," I said. "They just stopped covering for her." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, heavy with guilt and confusion. "Maybe we should have listened to you sooner." "I wasn't asking to be listened to," I said. "Just respected." The weeks that followed felt strangely peaceful. Melissa stopped calling, stopped posting. Her perfect Instagram life went silent. Her online presence erased overnight. I didn't take pleasure in it, not really. There's a difference between satisfaction and joy, and what I felt was the first one. I wasn't happy she was suffering. I was relieved the truth finally existed somewhere outside my head. A few months later, I ran into Derek at a cafe downtown. He looked tired but lighter, the kind of tired that comes after you've started breathing again. He told me the court had ruled in his favor. He'd gotten custody, and Melissa was ordered to attend therapy before supervised visits. She'd moved back in with our parents for a while, though that arrangement wasn't going smoothly. "I just wanted to say thanks," he said awkwardly, stirring his coffee. "For not yelling. For doing things right. You started the chain reaction I needed to get out." I nodded. "You did the hard part." He smiled faintly. "No. You showed me it was possible." When I left the cafe, the air felt cool and clear. The world had quietly corrected itself. Not perfectly, but enough. The kids were safe, Derek was rebuilding, and Melissa was finally facing a reality she couldn't manipulate away. Months passed, and one day, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled on the front. Inside was a check for $1,200 and a short note in familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry. I mean it this time." I didn't frame it or gloat. I deposited the check and threw the note away. Some apologies don't need to live on paper. That evening, I took a walk near the river, the same spot I used to go when my back hurt too much to sit still during recovery. The water moved slow and steady, reflecting the city lights. I thought about everything that had happened, the surgery, the chaos, the silence, the slow rise out of it all, and I realized I didn't hate Melissa. I didn't even pity her. I just let go. Revenge hadn't been about destruction. It had been about correction, about drawing a line and never letting anyone cross it again. As I stood there, the cool breeze against my face, I smiled to myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one carrying anyone else's weight. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all. My name's Evan, I'm 28, and up until a few months ago, I genuinely believed that my family, dysfunctional as they are, would never actively mess me over. Passive-aggressive texts, favoritism, guilt trips about not calling enough? Sure. But financial betrayal? Identity theft? That never even crossed my mind. I guess I still had some illusions about what family meant, even after everything I'd been through with them. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. Not the favorite, not the golden child, just the one who didn't cause problems. While my younger brother, Josh, racked up traffic tickets and switched college majors like socks, I kept my head down. I moved out at 19, worked full-time through college, paid off my used car in cash, and built my credit score like it was my lifeline. I never asked my parents for help. Not once. And to be honest, a small part of me hoped they'd notice that. That maybe, one day, I'd get a "we're proud of you" moment of my own. But in our house, Josh was the sun, and the rest of us just orbited around him. The whole thing started at his graduation party. It was a massive backyard setup with fairy lights, catered food, a speaker system loud enough to scare the neighbors, and a photo booth manned by a professional photographer. I showed up late, partially because I had work, partially because I dreaded being back in that house. My dad was already a few drinks in, his voice booming over the music as he raised a glass for the toast. "To my boy Josh," he said, swaying slightly. "Nothing's too expensive for my son. That's why I took out a loan in Evan's name." Everyone laughed. My mom chuckled and patted my arm. Josh was already 3 drinks deep, red-faced and beaming, soaking up the attention. I gave a forced smile, that tight, polite kind you practice at work when a customer says something weird. I assumed it was a joke, an awful one, sure, but just a joke. But something about the way my dad grinned at me, it was off. It lingered too long, too proud. Like he'd actually done something clever. That night, lying in bed with my phone charger barely reaching the outlet, I couldn't shake it. So I did what I'd never thought I'd need to do. I pulled up my credit report. It loaded slowly, like the universe was preparing me. When it finally did, I blinked. Then I sat up straight. Then I stood. There it was, a $26,000 personal loan opened 5 months ago with a cosigner listed as my father. The payments had been irregular. 1 month on time, 2 skipped. And the most recent statement showed a 30-day delinquency. I didn't sleep that night. I just paced. The betrayal was thick, sticky, like something I couldn't scrub off my skin. I thought about calling them, texting, maybe even showing up at the house, but my hands were shaking. I didn't want explanations. I wanted answers, and I wanted proof. So the next morning, I walked into the bank listed on the loan account. I still had the email from my credit report open on my phone, like a fresh wound. The banker, a woman in her early 40s with the kind of tight smile people wear when they smell conflict coming, asked for ID and proof of address. Then she pulled up the account and went still. "You didn't apply for this loan?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "No," I said, steady but cold. "But I want the full application. Copies of the documents. Signatures. Everything." She hesitated, maybe trying to decide if I was about to explode, but eventually nodded and disappeared into the back. When she returned, she placed a manila folder in front of me. Inside were scan-outs of my driver's license and social security number, my name signed in shaky cursive that didn't even try to mimic my real signature, and a utility bill that looked doctored. The handwriting on the signature line? Definitely not mine. But the co-signers? That was my dad's handwriting. I'd seen it on every birthday card and school permission slip growing up. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I called the credit bureau. I called a lawyer. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at nothing while my coffee went cold in the cup holder. Then my phone buzzed. Group chat. Fam bam. Dad texted, "LOL, Evan, don't be so serious. It was a joke. Josh needed help." "What's family for?" Mom texted, "Don't overreact. You know your father meant well." Josh texted, "Dude, chill. It's not like you were using your credit anyway." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then I put the phone face down and walked back into the bank. My lawyer had said the first step was filing a fraud claim. The banker helped me start it, and I officially submitted a report stating the loan was unauthorized. It triggered an automatic freeze on the account and flagged the co-signer for investigation. The next morning was pure chaos. 47 texts, 9 missed calls, 3 voicemails from my mother's crying voice, all variations of "don't ruin this family," and a final text from Josh. "You're really gonna mess over your own brother?" That was the moment something inside me hardened. I wasn't just angry, I was done. Done pretending to be the reasonable one. Done absorbing their garbage like I was made of rubber. For years, I'd swallowed it all. The favoritism, the gaslighting, the guilt trips. But this wasn't just emotional damage. This was criminal. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd torched it and danced on the ashes. I called the police, filed a formal report, sent over the loan documents, including the fake signature and forged utility bill. Then I went to my office, sat at my desk like it was any other Tuesday, and let the group chat stew in silence. And that's when the real fallout began. By Wednesday, the panic had evolved into desperation. The tone of the text shifted from smug dismissal to outright fear. My mom sent me a picture of a handwritten letter, supposedly from my dad, apologizing for the misunderstanding, as if that word could somehow encompass identity theft and financial fraud. The letter tried to frame it as a simple accident. I meant to apply in my own name, but the paperwork got mixed up. Like my social security number accidentally wandered onto a loan application by itself. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed to see how deep this went. My lawyer, Michelle, called that afternoon. Sharp, no nonsense, and blessedly unaffected by my family's fake sincerity, she'd already started digging. She told me the fraud investigation could take weeks, but from what we had already, there was a strong case for both criminal charges and a civil suit. You realize this could end with your dad getting jail time, right? She asked, gently. I didn't hesitate. Yeah, I know. And that was the truth. I'd loved my dad once. I probably still did, in some frayed, tattered corner of my heart. But what he did went beyond a mistake. He looked at me, not Josh, not some stranger, me, and decided that my future, my financial stability, was disposable. Just a convenient sacrifice to help his favorite son get ahead. The more I thought about it, the more pieces started to fall into place. Why my dad kept asking if I had any loans open, why he was weirdly interested in my move last year, when I had to update my mailing address. He must have waited until I submitted a change of address, then had the loan documents mailed to my old place, my parents' house, so I'd never see them. I started replaying memories from the last year with new eyes. The way Josh had been bragging about the new car he got a deal on. How my dad had casually mentioned helping Josh get back on his feet after his fourth attempt at community college didn't pan out. And how no one in the family blinked when Josh showed up with a new MacBook and the latest iPhone, while I was still using a 6-year-old Android with a cracked screen. The bank confirmed the money had been wired directly into Josh's account. That night, I finally picked up when my mom called. I didn't say anything at first, just let her talk. Evan, honey, I know you're upset, but this is tearing us apart. Your father was just trying to help Josh. You know he's been struggling, and we didn't think it would hurt you. You weren't using your credit, were you? That sentence. You weren't using your credit. It hit me like a punch. To them, I was just a vault. An extra bank account with legs and a conscience. Not a person. Not someone who had earned that good credit score through years of sacrifice, budgeting, and refusing to let myself sink. Just a tool. I wasn't using it, I said slowly. But I planned to. She was silent, probably trying to calculate if I meant that literally or metaphorically. I continued. I was pre-approved for a mortgage 3 months ago. I've been saving for a down payment. I found a small house near the lake. 2 bedrooms. One for me, one for. I stopped myself. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even them. But I was going to propose to Maya this fall. I'd already picked out the ring. The house was part of the plan. Our future. Mom exhaled sharply, like she'd been slapped. Oh, I didn't know. Of course not. No one asks about my life unless they need something. She tried to say something, but I hung up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just cold. The next few days blurred. Michelle filed additional paperwork. I submitted the fraud affidavit to all 3 credit bureaus. The police followed up to take my statement. And then silence. My family didn't call. The group chat went dark. No texts, no voicemails, no passive-aggressive memes from my aunt about forgiving family. It felt eerie, like the calm before a storm. And sure enough, it didn't last. That Saturday, I got a knock at my door. When I opened it, my dad was standing there, looking haggard. He wasn't his usual blustering self. His shoulders were hunched, eyes sunken, voice quiet. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. I didn't invite him in. "I know I messed up," he began, hands shaking. "But you're my son. I never meant to hurt you." I stayed silent. He went on, spinning a sob story about how Josh was depressed, how the family was falling apart, how he thought this would just be temporary, that he'd pay it off before I noticed. He even had the nerve to say, "I thought maybe you'd understand. You've always been the strong one." That line broke something in me. "The strong one," I repeated, almost laughing. "You mean the one you thought wouldn't fight back?" He flinched. I crossed my arms. "You didn't ask me. You didn't even warn me. You used my name like it was a spare set of keys. And now I can't even qualify for a mortgage because your golden boy wanted a car and a new laptop." His expression twisted, like he was about to say something cruel, but then he looked down. "I'll fix it," he muttered. "I'll talk to the bank. Maybe if you drop the charges." I cut him off. "You think this ends with a conversation? I filed a police report. There's an open fraud case. You committed a felony, Dad. This isn't just family drama anymore. It's criminal." He stared at me like I was a stranger. Then, quietly, almost with disgust, he said, "You'd really send your own father to jail?" And I stared right back. "You already sent me there," I said. "You just didn't hear the door slam." He left without another word. And that would have been the end of it, except 2 days later, I got a text from my cousin Kelsey. She sent me a screenshot of a post on Facebook from my mom. It was one of those long, vague, emotional guilt trip posts. No names, of course, but all about how some children don't understand sacrifice and how family isn't about money. The comments were full of clapping emojis and people saying things like, "You're such a strong mother," and "Kids today don't appreciate what their parents go through." That's when I realized they still didn't think they did anything wrong. To them, I was the villain, the selfish one, the disloyal one, the ungrateful child. And that's when I decided I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to make sure they never did this to anyone else again. I didn't respond to the Facebook post. I didn't comment, I didn't message my mom, and I definitely didn't engage with the cloying fake sympathy rolling in from her church friends and ex-coworkers. But I did take screenshots. Every paragraph dripping with martyrdom, every half-baked comment defending parental sacrifice. I saved them all, not because I planned to use them right away, but because I knew how people like my parents operated. They lied with confidence, rewrote history with just enough vagueness to make anyone else look like the bad guy. I wasn't going to argue with their version of the story. I was going to replace it. The real tipping point came later that week, when I got a call from a woman named Dana. She worked at a local credit union, not the same one where my dad took out the loan. She introduced herself cautiously, said she was following up on a pending auto loan application, and needed to verify some employment details. I was confused at first. I hadn't applied for anything. "What's the applicant's name?" I asked. "Joshua Matthews." "But the co-applicant listed is Evan Matthews." My chest went ice cold. They were still trying to use me. I asked for the exact date the application was filed. It was 3 days ago, after I'd already reported the fraud, after I'd already confronted them. They knew I was pressing charges, and they still tried to sneak in another application under my name. Dana apologized profusely, sent me a copy of the request, and immediately flagged the loan. But I sat at my desk in silence for 10 straight minutes. This wasn't just a bad decision. It wasn't a desperate moment of poor judgment. It was intentional, and it wasn't over. I called Michelle. "We're going scorched earth," I said. She didn't flinch. "Okay." Then we build a case. Every document, every attempt. I'll get subpoenas out for bank activity, application timestamps, digital signatures. If there's a paper trail, we'll find it. And we did. Over the next 2 weeks, we found 3 separate attempts to use my name on loan applications. 2 personal, 1 auto. One of them had even used a Gmail address I'd never seen before, evan.matthews.home@gmail.com, which my dad had clearly made to impersonate me. It was like watching a psychological horror movie in slow motion. I started looking at my family like strangers. Because what kind of parent plans this? Not just a one-time mistake, but a calculated scheme over months, using their own child's name as a credit card? And what kind of sibling goes along with it, knowing full well it was your name on the dotted line? Every memory I had with them started to sour. The road trips when I was a kid, my dad singing out of tune in the front seat. The family dinners where Josh always got seconds before anyone else. The day my mom cried when I got into college and told me, "We don't have much, but we're proud of you." Lies. All of it. The police moved faster than I expected. Maybe it was the multiple applications. Maybe it was how neatly organized Michelle kept everything. Or maybe they just wanted a clean win. Whatever the reason, within a month of filing, they called to tell me my father was being formally charged with identity theft, bank fraud, and wire fraud. The moment felt surreal, like I was watching it happen to someone else. Word spread fast. My cousin called to say she'd seen my mom crying in the grocery store. My aunt sent a long text that started with, "I'm not taking sides," and ended with, "But maybe this didn't need to get so legal." Even Josh tried to reach out, left a voicemail where he sounded more annoyed than sorry, ranting about how this could ruin Dad's life, and "You always act like you're better than the rest of us." I didn't call back. Instead, I focused on making sure I had everything in order: frozen credit, new passwords, 2-factor authentication on every single account, even a new phone plan. I'd underestimated them once. I wasn't going to do it again. And still, the most unexpected betrayal came next. One evening, I stopped by the mailbox in my apartment building and saw an envelope with a familiar address, my parents' return label. Inside was a typed letter and signed, with a single sentence printed in bold. You may have won the battle, but family never forgets. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement, just a threat. That was the moment the last thread snapped. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It wasn't about credit scores or financial security. It was about making sure they could never do this to me or anyone again. They thought they could manipulate me with guilt. They thought I'd fold once the heat got turned up. They thought being family meant they were untouchable. But they'd forgotten one thing. I wasn't the scared, compliant kid anymore. And I still had one more card to play. I read that sentence over and over again. You may have won the battle, but family never forgets. It was typed and signed, printed like some kind of movie villain threat. No apology. No attempt to explain, just bitterness, entitlement, arrogance. And suddenly I realized they still thought they had some kind of power over me. Even now, even after the police charges, after the frozen credit, after getting caught forging my signature 3 different times. They thought the word family still held leverage. But to me, that word didn't mean what it used to. It didn't mean love or support or history anymore. It meant damage. It meant betrayal. And if they wanted to send threats, I could send consequences. 2 weeks later, my father was arraigned. I didn't attend the hearing in person. I didn't need to. Michelle went in my place, armed with a thick folder of evidence. The forged applications, the signature comparisons, the forged Gmail account and its IP trace, copies of the loan transfers into Josh's account, screenshots of the group chat messages and voicemails where they joked about the favor. The case was clean, tidy, devastating. My dad pled not guilty. Of course he did. But the prosecution had everything they needed. And now that it was in motion, I made the second move. I filed a civil lawsuit. My goal wasn't just to punish my father with criminal charges. I wanted to take financial control back into my own hands. The damage to my credit was real. I couldn't qualify for the mortgage anymore. My rate had skyrocketed. And the small house by the lake? Gone. Someone else had bought it while my credit report was frozen. And no, I hadn't told Maya why. Not yet. But I planned to, just as soon as I fixed it. The civil suit demanded repayment for damages, credit restoration costs, and emotional distress. Michelle warned me the family would try to settle quietly. She was right. Within days of being served, my mom reached out. We can pay part of it, she offered over the phone, her voice tight. If you just drop the lawsuit. We don't want this to go public. I almost laughed. Now they were worried about it going public? Pay all of it, I said, or it goes to trial. She tried bargaining, pleading, even cried. Told me Josh was on probation at work and couldn't afford to have a scandal right now. That my dad was having chest pains. That the stress was tearing the family apart. And when none of that worked, she went back to guilt. You're really going to destroy your own family over money? That line was so familiar. I'd heard variations of it my whole life. Whenever I set boundaries. Whenever I said no. Whenever I refused to be walked over. But this time, I didn't flinch. You already destroyed this family, I said, the second you decided I was just a tool. Then I hung up. The civil suit moved forward. To avoid court, they liquidated a few assets. My dad's truck. My mom's investment jewelry. They sold some furniture. Took out a legitimate loan, in their names this time. And they wired the full amount. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just forwarded the confirmation to Michelle and closed the file. The money wasn't a gift. It was restitution. Payment for what they stole, not just from my finances, but from my future. And then came the final step. I cut them off. No more texts. No more calls. No more pretending. I blocked every number. Left the family group chat. Moved apartments. Got a new number and made sure they couldn't reach me through anyone else. I didn't leave a dramatic voicemail or write some final speech. I didn't need to. They knew why. They just didn't want to accept it. For a while, I still got mail forwarded from my old place. Birthday cards with "Love Always" written in my mother's slanted handwriting. Christmas photos with Josh's new dog, probably bought with the laptop refund money they finally returned. One letter from my dad with no return address that just said, "I did what I had to do. You'll understand someday." No, I won't. I shredded every letter. I didn't tell Maya the whole story until months later. We were sitting on the floor of our new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and pizza boxes, and she asked me if I'd ever introduce her to my parents. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look shocked. She just squeezed my hand and said, "You protected yourself. That's not something you should feel ashamed of. That's something you should be proud of." And for the first time since this all started, I actually let myself believe her. People always say blood is thicker than water. But what they forget is that saying comes from a longer phrase. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which means the relationships you choose are stronger than the ones you're born into. And I finally understood that. My family didn't protect me. They used me, lied to me, stole from me. But I survived. I held them accountable. I reclaimed my name. And I walked away. Now, I live a life where every decision is mine. My finances are clean. My future is mine to rebuild. And if they ever try to contact me again, they'll find I no longer exist in their world. And they certainly don't exist in mine. I never thought my biggest nightmare would show up on my doorstep wearing sweatpants and a smug grin. My name's Trevor. I'm 32 years old, and I spent the last decade clawing my way out of a childhood that never really felt like mine. While most kids were out playing baseball or begging their parents for ice cream money, I was scrubbing floors, clipping grocery coupons, and pretending I wasn't bothered that my younger brother, Ryan, never lifted a finger. He always got the new toys, the praise, the extra slice of cake, while I got the lectures and the guilt trips. And now, after years of saving, hustling, working 2 jobs while going to night school, I finally had something of my own, my dream apartment. Quiet neighborhood, big windows, a balcony that overlooked the city skyline. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. Every inch of it was bought with sacrifice. I'd moved in just 3 weeks before it happened. I still remember the smell of fresh paint mixed with coffee the first morning I woke up there. I didn't even have a bed frame yet, just a mattress on the floor and boxes I hadn't unpacked, but it felt like peace. For the first time in my life, no one was yelling through the walls or asking me for money. I could breathe. I could be still. I could finally build a life on my own terms. And then came the knock. It was around 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday. I remember because I'd planned to sleep in for the first time in months. No alarms, no emails, no work. Just me, a blanket, and maybe some pancakes if I felt motivated. The knock started as a tap, but it quickly turned aggressive, like someone was trying to pound their way through the door. I groaned, rolled out of bed, and dragged myself to the peephole, expecting maybe a neighbor in distress or a package delivery gone wrong. But when I looked through, my stomach dropped. It was my dad, and standing behind him, arms crossed, and wearing that familiar smug look, was Ryan. I hesitated for a second. Something felt off. I hadn't spoken to my dad in weeks, and the last time we talked, it ended with him accusing me of forgetting where I came from. I almost didn't open the door, but a part of me, the trained part, the don't be rude part, gave in. I cracked it open, blinking away the sleep from my eyes. "Morning," I said, voice hoarse. "Everything okay?" Dad didn't waste a second. He shoved the door open fully and walked right in like he owned the place. Ryan followed, trailing a duffel bag that looked like it hadn't been zipped properly in years. I just stood there, stunned, as the two of them walked into my living room, looked around, and made themselves comfortable. Dad sat on the arm of the couch, while Ryan dropped his bag with a thud and flopped down onto the cushion like he was auditioning for a beer commercial. "We need to talk," Dad said. I didn't move. "About what?" He nodded toward Ryan. "He's going to stay here for a while." I blinked. "What?" "He needs a place to get back on his feet," he continued, as if this were some pre-planned intervention and I was just the final step in their master plan. "You've got space. It makes sense." Ryan didn't say a word. He just stared at me, chewing gum and bouncing his knee like he was bored out of his mind. I could already feel my blood pressure rising. My apartment was 1 bedroom. I didn't have a couch that turned into a bed. I didn't even have enough towels for 2 people yet. And now they were just assuming? I shook my head. "No, I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen." Dad raised his eyebrows like I'd just spoken in another language. "Trevor, don't be selfish." "Selfish?" I repeated, louder than I meant to. "I just moved in. I've worked for 10 years to get here. I finally have something that's mine, and you want me to. What? Give it up so Ryan can what? Crash on my couch indefinitely. He's your brother," Dad said, like that explained everything. "He's family." I looked at Ryan. He still hadn't spoken. No apology. No explanation. Just that smug, entitled smirk that I'd grown up with. That smirk that always said, I'll get what I want eventually. I took a deep breath. And what exactly happened to your apartment? I asked him directly. Ryan shrugged. Didn't pay rent. That was it. No shame, no excuse, just pure indifference. Like the consequences didn't matter because someone would always catch him when he fell. Dad stood up, walking toward me like he was delivering some righteous speech. He's had a rough time. You wouldn't understand because everything's been handed to you lately. I actually laughed. Handed to me? I worked 2 jobs and went to school for 6 years straight. I slept in my car for 3 months in 2017 because you refused to co-sign for a lease. Don't talk to me about being handed anything. Dad's face hardened, like he was remembering something inconvenient. But he didn't back down. This is temporary. A few weeks, that's all. Just until he finds work. I was about to speak when Ryan finally piped up. Chill, man. It's not a big deal. I'll stay out of your way. That's when I knew they'd already made the decision for me. This wasn't a request. It was a demand, dressed up as a family favor. I crossed my arms. No, he's not staying here. Dad narrowed his eyes. You're really going to turn your back on your own brother? You turned your back on me years ago, I said quietly. There was a long silence. Dad looked at me like I was some ungrateful stranger. Ryan looked annoyed, like I'd just canceled his vacation. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt angry, but I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just stood there, waiting for them to say something that would justify the fact that they had just barged into my life uninvited, expecting me to sacrifice everything I'd built just because they thought I owed them. And then Dad said something I'll never forget. You wouldn't even have this apartment if it weren't for us. That's when everything inside me started to shift. I looked around, at the walls I painted, the couch I assembled myself, the coffee table I found secondhand and restored on weekends. Every dollar, every hour, every sacrifice, it had all led here. And now they were trying to rewrite history like I'd been carried here on their shoulders. I laughed. It was quiet at first, then louder, then full-blown laughter that caught both of them off guard. Dad stepped back, confused. What's so funny? I stopped laughing just long enough to meet his eyes. You really think I owe you? After everything. Ryan looked away, probably realizing this wasn't going to go the way they thought. But Dad wasn't done. He wasn't the type to back down when his authority was questioned. And that's when he said, if you're not going to do the right thing, maybe we'll have to make you. That was the moment everything shifted from annoying to threatening. And it was just the beginning. I stood there, barefoot on the hardwood floor, the morning chill creeping up my legs as my father threw down the gauntlet with a look that wasn't just disappointment. It was a warning. Maybe we'll have to make you. He wasn't yelling. That made it worse. It was that calm, passive-aggressive tone I knew too well. The tone he used when he punished me without raising his voice. The one that made you feel crazy for pushing back. But I wasn't 16 anymore, and this wasn't his house. You're threatening me now? I asked, voice low. Don't be dramatic, he scoffed, waving it off. All I'm saying is, sometimes you need to be reminded of your place in the family. My place. I repeated, stunned. You mean the one where I was the backup parent, the live-in babysitter, the walking wallet? Ryan snorted. Dude, stop acting like you were Cinderella. I turned to him. You want to talk about acting? You've been faking effort your whole life. How many jobs have you quit this year alone? He shrugged, unbothered. Jobs suck. I clenched my jaw. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the pressure of years of swallowing every ounce of resentment I'd built up just to keep the peace. This wasn't just about him crashing on my couch. It was everything. The birthdays forgotten, the support I never got, the way Dad had turned me into the family scapegoat while Ryan coasted through life on a golden raft of low expectations. Dad finally took a step closer, trying to regain control. You're blowing this out of proportion. He needs help. You have help to give. Why is that so hard? I didn't respond. I just opened the door. You both need to leave. Now. Trevor. Now. They left, eventually. Not with any kind of remorse, just grumbling and throwing around words like ungrateful and selfish as they went. Ryan made sure to slam the door on his way out. I didn't sleep the rest of that day. I just sat on my mattress, staring at the ceiling. I knew they'd come back. That much entitlement doesn't just go away after one failed ambush. And sure enough, the text started the next morning. Dad, I talked to your aunt. She agrees you're being unreasonable. Ryan, you got a spare key? I might drop by to grab some stuff. Dad, this is your brother, Trevor. He's not some stranger. You have a duty. By the end of the week, I was blocking numbers left and right. I told them no. That should have been enough. But the thing about people like my dad, they don't respect boundaries unless they're enforced with brick walls and barbed wire. So when I came home one evening and saw the building manager chatting with Ryan outside the front door of the complex, I knew something was up. I walked up calmly, shopping bags in hand. "Hey," I said. Ryan grinned like we were best buds. "What's up, bro?" "Just telling Mr. Calver here I used to live with you. Thought I'd see the place again." Mr. Calver, a nice older guy who'd always greeted me with a wave, looked confused. "You didn't say anything about moving in, Trevor." "I didn't," I said sharply, locking eyes with Ryan. "He's not staying here." Ryan's expression tightened. "Come on, man. I told you I'd help with rent." "You said that. You also said you wouldn't get kicked out of your last two places." He shrugged. "They had stupid rules. Like paying rent." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but saw the building manager watching and bit his tongue. He picked up his bag and muttered something under his breath before walking off. I apologized to Mr. Calver, who just nodded and said to keep him updated if there were any issues. I was grateful he hadn't just handed over a key to someone who claimed to be family. But the damage was already creeping in. That night, I found the side gate to the building propped open with a rock. A few days later, I spotted Ryan again, this time at the cafe across the street, just sitting there, watching the front of the building. When I caught his eye, he just smirked and looked away. I started checking the locks twice before bed. I bought a camera doorbell. I kept the balcony door locked, even though it was 10 floors up. Still, the messages kept coming. "Dad, why are you being so cruel? You're acting like we're enemies. Aunt Carla, your dad is heartbroken. Ryan struggling. This is not who you are. Ryan, you think you're better than me? You always have." I ignored them all, but that silence seemed to fuel them even more. I guess they weren't used to me standing my ground. Then came the tipping point. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I was working late on a freelance project, something I'd taken on to cover the furniture I still needed. Around 10:30, I decided to take a break and run down to the corner store for snacks. I wasn't gone more than 15 minutes. When I got back, the front door of my apartment was slightly ajar. My heart stopped. I checked the lock. It hadn't been forced, which meant someone had a key. A spare. I never gave out a spare. Except, I tore through the drawer where I'd kept it. The small plastic case was gone. No sound from inside the apartment. I tiptoed in, quietly opening the door to the bedroom. He was there. Ryan. Lying on my bed, shoes still on, phone in hand, scrolling like he owned the place. There were empty food containers on the floor. My bathroom light was on. The shower was wet. My towels, my brand new towels, were crumpled on the floor. "What the hell are you doing here?" I choked out, voice shaking. Ryan didn't even flinch. "Relax. I'm just crashing for the night. You broke into my apartment. I used the key." "You stole the key," I snapped. "You waited until I left, and you let yourself in." Ryan sat up, annoyed. "Dude, stop being so dramatic. You know Dad said I could stay. Dad doesn't live here." "I do." "Well, maybe if you'd just grown a spine earlier, we wouldn't have to do this the hard way." That line hit me like a slap. He wanted me to fight back. He thought this was just another power play, another tug of war he could win by being more shameless than me. He'd grown up seeing me bend under Dad's pressure, under guilt, under obligation, and he assumed I'd bend again. But something broke in me that night. I walked to the closet, pulled out a garbage bag, and began throwing his stuff in it. Ryan jumped up. "Yo, what the hell are you doing? You're leaving. Now." He moved toward me like he was going to grab the bag, but I backed up fast. "You lay a finger on me, and I'm calling the cops." "You wouldn't. Try me." He stopped. We stood there in a silent standoff. Two brothers who hadn't really spoken like real siblings in years, now enemies in a war neither of us fully understood. But the air between us was thick with everything we never said. Every moment I'd cleaned up his mess. Every time Dad praised him while scolding me. Every year I spent fixing the family's problems while they let him burn the place down. "You think you're so high and mighty now," Ryan said finally, eyes narrowed. "You think you're better than us." "I don't think I'm better," I said. "I think I'm done." He left. Not quietly, of course. He slammed things, cursed under his breath, accused me of being heartless. But he left. I locked the door behind him and called the building manager that night. We changed the locks the next morning. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Because just when I thought I could breathe again, something happened that knocked the wind out of me completely. The next day, I got a call from my bank. Someone had tried to open a joint checking account using my name. My credit had been pulled. A new phone line was activated under my identity. I didn't understand how, until I remembered. A year ago, before I moved, I'd left a file of old documents at my dad's house, stuff I thought I'd tossed, an expired ID, old utility bills, a printout of my social security number from when I'd been trying to correct a tax error. I'd meant to shred it. I never did. Now I was staring down the barrel of a stolen identity, and I had a pretty good idea who was behind it. I filed a fraud report that same day. I froze my credit. I spent hours on the phone with banks, credit bureaus, the phone company. And the entire time, one thought burned through my skull like fire. They weren't just trying to leech off me anymore. They were trying to be me. They weren't just testing boundaries. They were trying to erase them. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about family anymore. This was war. Rock bottom doesn't always feel like a dramatic crash. Sometimes, it's a quiet, dull ache. A slow unraveling you don't fully notice until you're sitting on your kitchen floor at 2 a.m. with a frozen pizza burning in the oven, your credit frozen, and your sense of trust fractured like a dropped mirror. That's where I was, 1 week after filing the fraud reports. A pile of paperwork on the table. Missed calls from banks and credit agencies. A notice from my landlord informing me of disturbances reported by other tenants. Apparently, Ryan had been loitering around the building, trying to get back what was his. My locks had been changed. My passwords updated. My mailbox rerouted. But I still felt like a stranger in my own home. Paranoid. On edge. Angry. And the worst part? No one believed me. When I tried to explain to my aunt what had happened, that I suspected Ryan had used my old documents to impersonate me, she gasped. Not out of shock, but offense. You're accusing your own brother of a federal crime, Trevor? Do you hear yourself? I did. And for the first time, I wasn't backing down. Yes, I do. She hung up on me. A few days later, my dad called. Not to apologize, not even to check on me, but to scold me for airing family laundry in a fraud report that might put Ryan in danger. His actual words were, "You're trying to destroy his future over some papers and a misunderstanding. You should have come to me first." I laughed bitterly. "The last time I came to you, you told me to let him live here without asking. You think you're the victim in all this?" He snapped. "You have everything. You always have. And now you want to kick your brother while he's down." That's when I stopped responding. Completely. I cut them off, cold and clean. Blocked numbers. Deleted contacts. I didn't send a dramatic goodbye or demand closure. I just let the silence grow between us like a canyon. Because I finally understood something. They weren't going to change. But I could. That realization hurt. It felt like grieving people who were still alive. I'd always been the fixer. The one who kept the family tied together with duct tape and grit. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who showed up at holidays, who took the emotional temperature of every room I walked into. I knew when Dad was simmering, when Ryan was about to cause trouble, when Mom, before she passed, was trying not to cry in the kitchen. I carried all of that, and now I wasn't. The first week of silence was brutal. The guilt crept in like fog. Was I being heartless? Was I really abandoning them? But then I'd look at the fraud report pinned to my fridge, or the charges I didn't make on a gas card in Ryan's hometown, and the fog would burn away. I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting myself. But it wasn't easy. My freelance clients dried up. I was too distracted to deliver consistent work. The stress had gnawed at my appetite. I lost weight. I stopped going to the gym. My skin broke out. I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't recognize the man staring back. Sunken eyes, stubble, exhaustion. I hit my lowest point 2 weeks after the identity theft. I was sitting in a government office waiting for a new social security card, surrounded by the hum of fluorescent lights and people arguing with clerks. A woman 2 seats down from me was crying softly. An older man next to her offered her a tissue. I just sat there numb. That's when I checked my email and saw it. A rejection from an apartment insurance claim I didn't even remember filing. Apparently, someone, likely Ryan, had tried to submit a fake claim using my address and name. That was it. That was the moment I truly broke. I left the office, sat on the curb outside, and cried. I hadn't cried like that in years. I wasn't even sure what I was crying for. My stolen identity. My broken family. The decade I spent building a life they tried to hijack. I don't know how long I sat there. But when I finally stood up, something felt different. Not better, just cleared. Like I'd finally reached the bottom of the well. There was nowhere else to sink. That's where the rebuilding began. Quietly, privately. No announcements. No big comeback speeches. Just one small decision at a time. First, I got my finances in order. I went through every account, every charge, every document. I filed police reports, submitted affidavits, called companies until my throat hurt. I talked to 3 different fraud investigators. I learned more about identity theft in a week than I ever wanted to know. It was exhausting, but every time I crossed something off my list, I felt a little stronger, like I was slowly dragging myself out of the pit. Then, I started writing again. Not just client work, but journaling. At first, it was just rants. Anger scrawled across the page like graffiti. But slowly, that turned into reflection. I wrote about my childhood, about the things I'd ignored for years. The time I cleaned the kitchen after Ryan's party while Dad yelled at me for being dramatic. The time Ryan stole $500 from my drawer and blamed a cousin. The Christmas when I gave up my bonus to pay the electric bill and no one thanked me. Writing helped me remember that I wasn't crazy, that I had been mistreated, that setting boundaries now wasn't betrayal, it was survival. Around that time, I found a community forum for people dealing with family estrangement. It wasn't Reddit, just a quiet corner of the internet where people like me shared stories. Some were darker than mine. Some were eerily similar. I read for hours. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. One comment stuck with me. You're not heartless for walking away. You're brave for breaking the cycle. I printed that out and taped it above my desk. As my mind cleared, opportunities started creeping back in. A former freelance client reached out, apologizing for the ghosting. He'd had a death in the family and needed help again. I took the gig, did good work. He referred me to 2 others. Within a month, I had a full plate again. Money started coming in. I replaced the mattress with a real bed frame. I bought plants for the windowsill. I started cooking again, real meals, not frozen ones. On a random Tuesday night, I made pasta with garlic bread and ate it on the balcony with music playing softly behind me. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like life. I even reached out to a therapist. That part scared me. I'd always been the handle it myself type. But something about talking to a neutral person, someone who didn't know my family, who wouldn't guilt me or twist things, felt necessary. It was hard at first. I didn't know where to begin. But once I opened the floodgates, it all came rushing out. My childhood, the favoritism, the way I was made to feel like a background character in my own life. My therapist, Lydia, didn't offer magical solutions. She just listened, validated, helped me reframe things. You weren't loved conditionally. You were used conditionally. That line hit me in the chest. She helped me realize I'd spent so long trying to earn love that was never given freely, that I kept trying to prove myself through achievements, generosity, obedience, just to get scraps of approval from people who saw me as a utility, not a son. Week by week, session by session, I started letting go of that narrative. I wasn't broken. I wasn't mean. I wasn't selfish. I was just done being the family's emotional punching bag. The rise wasn't fast. It wasn't cinematic. No training montages or big breakthroughs. Just small victories. Rebuilding routines. Relearning joy. One of those victories came on a Sunday morning when I walked past a local photography gallery downtown. I'd always loved photography, but stopped shooting when things got too chaotic. That morning, I walked in and asked about community exhibits. The woman at the desk, a soft-spoken curator named Elise, told me about a small show coming up. You should submit something, she said. So I did. I pulled out my old camera, took walks around the city, captured details, cracks in sidewalks, birds on fire escapes, elderly couples holding hands. I submitted 3 black and white prints. Nothing dramatic, just quiet moments of life continuing. A month later, one of them was chosen for display. It wasn't sold. It didn't go viral, but it meant something. That moment, the night I stood at the gallery, looking at my photo hanging on the wall with my name printed underneath, it felt like proof that I could create something beautiful without anyone's permission, without anyone stealing it, without anyone twisting it into guilt. I was rebuilding, and I wasn't done yet. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, a letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside, just a single sheet of paper. Typed. No greeting. No signature. You think this is over, but you owe us more than you know. You'll regret turning your back on your own blood. We're not done. My hands went cold. I reread it 3 times. Same feeling each time, dread. The ink was smudged slightly on one corner. The paper was cheap, but the message was clear. They weren't finished. They hadn't learned. They were planning something. And I knew, deep in my gut, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everything they thought they could still take. And for the first time, I didn't just want to protect myself. I wanted justice. I didn't sleep the night I got the letter. I kept the envelope on my kitchen counter under a ceramic mug, like it might float away if I didn't weigh it down. The words kept repeating in my head like an itch I couldn't reach. You think this is over, but you owe us more than you know. We're not done. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. The voice was clear. That blend of self-righteous victimhood and subtle threat? It had my father written all over it. And Ryan. Well, he didn't usually speak in complete sentences, but he had no problem delivering messages, especially if they came with a middle finger and a smirk. But something had changed in me since all this started. 6 months ago, I might have panicked. I might have reached out, tried to reason with them, tried to fix things, tried to remind them that I wasn't the enemy. But that man, the one who begged for scraps of decency from people who saw him as disposable, he didn't live here anymore. And the one who replaced him? He was done playing defense. I spent the next morning pacing. No music, no podcasts. Just pacing. Thinking. Not about revenge, at first. Not really. I told myself I was just protecting myself, that I needed to be prepared in case they escalated. But the longer I stared at that letter, the clearer it became. This wasn't about a one-time boundary being crossed. This was a campaign. They weren't just trying to guilt me. They were trying to reclaim me. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to retaliate in anger. I was going to bury them with truth. I started where all great revenge plans begin, with documentation. I pulled out every file I had, bank statements, fraud reports, screenshots of texts, emails, social media posts. I created a timeline. From the first knock on my door to the day I got that letter. I printed things, highlighted, labeled, annotated. I even included the building's security footage showing Ryan loitering near the entrance weeks after he'd been banned from the property. I called the police and requested the official report on the attempted identity theft. It was a slow process, but it gave me a file number. Then I contacted the phone company and requested logs of the new line that had been opened in my name. I wasn't doing this to press charges yet. Not yet. But I wanted to be ready. Because the next time they tried something, I wouldn't be explaining myself. I'd be presenting evidence. Once the foundation was set, I did something I knew would make things personal. I filed a civil no-contact order against Ryan. I didn't expect it to go through right away. Courts take time, and I wasn't dealing with someone who'd physically harmed me. But I had enough paperwork to show a pattern: unauthorized entry, identity theft, harassment, threats. The judge scheduled a hearing 2 weeks out and approved a temporary protection order in the meantime. That meant Ryan couldn't come near me or my home without risking arrest. And when the court date came, I would be ready. But I wasn't done. Because the deeper I dug, the more I realized something. This wasn't just personal. This was systemic. My father had spent years enabling Ryan, co-signing leases, paying off debts, covering for him when things went sideways. But what if that support wasn't as clean as it looked? I remembered something from years ago, an offhand comment my mom made before she passed. She said Dad used to move money around when bills piled up. At the time, I assumed she meant credit cards. But now, in the glow of hindsight, it hit me like a freight train. My dad had access to my accounts when I was in college. I logged into an old email account I hadn't touched in years, the one tied to my student banking. And there it was, like a ghost from another life. A string of bank alerts from 2014, showing small but consistent transfers to an account I didn't recognize. $50 here. $75 there. I checked the statements. I never authorized them. The transfers stopped after I changed my bank password that spring, right after a screaming match with Dad where he accused me of hiding things. I didn't have hard proof that it was him, but I didn't need it right away, because now I had a pattern, and patterns speak louder than denials. I started reaching out to people. Not family, God, no, but people on the periphery. My cousin Jacob, who used to be close to Ryan before he moved out of state. A former roommate of Ryan's I tracked down on Facebook. Even a woman Ryan had dated briefly, a bartender named Lacey who messaged me back after a week of silence. What I got from them wasn't earth-shattering, but it painted a picture. Jacob told me Ryan once bragged about knowing how to use other people's credit without getting caught. The ex-roommate claimed Ryan had accidentally used his identity to apply for a lease, then ghosted when it got denied. And Lacey? She said Ryan had lied about his job, his age, and even claimed his uncle was paying his bills, except later, she found letters addressed to me on his desk. She recognized my name when I messaged her and said, "I thought you were his lawyer or something." None of this was enough to build a criminal case. Yet, but it gave me one thing: leverage. I printed everything, labeled it all, sealed it in a folder. Then I did something bold. I emailed my father. I didn't threaten. I didn't insult. I didn't plead. I just wrote, "I have enough documentation to show a sustained pattern of harassment, identity theft, and financial abuse. I suggest you stop contacting me and ensure Ryan does the same. If I receive even one more message from either of you, I'll be submitting the file to the authorities." The hearing date for the no contact order is next week. Let's not escalate this further. And then I waited. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 days. No response. Then, on the 4th day, I got an email, not from my father, but from a lawyer. His lawyer. It was a cease and desist. Laughable, really. Accusing me of harassment. Claiming I was defaming Ryan and causing emotional distress by slandering him to mutual acquaintances. I smiled, because now I had something even better. Proof that they were scared. So I took the letter, attached it to my documentation, and forwarded it to my own attorney. That's right. I had one now. A woman named Marina, recommended by a friend in my photography group. She specialized in family disputes and financial abuse cases. I booked a consultation and showed her everything. Every screenshot, every transfer, every message, the attempted identity theft, the letter, even the cease and desist. She didn't blink. "This is solid," she said. "You've got a paper trail most clients don't. If you wanted to pursue charges or sue for damages, you'd have a case." I wasn't sure yet. Part of me still hesitated at the word lawsuit. But hearing a professional say I wasn't crazy, that what they did wasn't normal, that meant something. Marina helped me file a formal response to the lawyer's letter. A crisp, professional reply asserting that no defamation had occurred and that further communication would be considered harassment. After that, silence. No calls, no emails, no mystery letters. I kept going. Got a new job offer, one with benefits and a steady paycheck. Moved my freelance clients to part-time. Started volunteering on weekends at a local shelter, helping teach basic photography to kids from underfunded schools. Nothing fancy, just disposable cameras and a place to express themselves. It was the most fulfilling thing I'd done in years. And I made new friends. Real ones. People who didn't know me as the responsible older brother, or the quiet one, or the ATM. Just Trevor. A guy who liked night photography and 90s movies and tried to make good pasta. I still had that envelope from the letter. I never threw it out. But now, it lived at the bottom of a locked drawer under all the documentation and my court papers. A reminder of how far I'd fallen and how far I'd risen. But I wasn't done yet. Because 2 weeks before the court hearing, I got a message from someone I didn't expect. Ryan's former employer, a man named Walter. "Hi, I got your number from Lacey. I think I have some information you'll want. About your brother and your dad." That's when everything changed. Walter's voice on the phone was calm, measured, but I could hear something else beneath it. Anger. Not the explosive kind, but the deep, tired kind you only get after someone's worn you down again and again until all you have left is resentment wrapped in restraint. "I was his manager for about 9 months, he said. "Ryan worked as a dispatcher, if you can call what he did work." We spoke for nearly 40 minutes. It started as a courtesy call. Walter said he didn't like how Ryan used my name and identity in conversations around the office, dropping hints that he was the brains behind our family's success. But then it turned into something else. Walter told me about missing inventory, an internal review, and a quietly launched investigation into suspicious vendor invoices tied to Ryan's work email. "I didn't push charges because it would have been messy," Walter admitted. "He got wind of it and quit before we could take it further. And then he said something I didn't expect. He mentioned your dad once. Said they had a fallback plan. Something about real estate. A claim." I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. Real estate. The apartment. My apartment. That same week, I'd been receiving promotional letters from a property management firm addressed to both me and Ryan. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe he'd used my address on some mailing list. But now, something didn't feel right. I thanked Walter, asked him to send any documentation he had, even if informal. He agreed. Then I pulled up my title deed. And there it was. A tiny discrepancy in the digital registry. My name was listed correctly, but there was a footnote added just weeks after I moved in. Something about a co-residency claim pending verification. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. They weren't just stalking. They weren't just threatening. They were trying to attach themselves legally to my property. And I knew exactly how. Back when I was finalizing the purchase, my dad helped notarize a few documents. At the time, I didn't think twice. He had an old friend who was a licensed notary, and it saved me the headache of booking appointments. I trusted him. That was my mistake. Because one of those forms? A declaration of ownership intent. It had 2 signatures, mine and Ryan's. Forged. I sat in silence for a long time after I found that. Not sad. Not scared. Just cold. Cold in that way you get when something inside you finally shuts off. When the last drop of grace dries up and what's left is clarity. I wasn't going to defend myself anymore. I was going on the offensive. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. I worked with Marina, my attorney, to build a case. Fraud, identity theft, attempted property claim, harassment, forgery. We gathered everything. Ryan's forged signature, Walter's testimony, the cease and desist, the text messages, the building's security reports, even a copy of the letter they'd mailed me. We filed an official complaint with the police, then a separate civil suit. But I didn't stop there. Because Ryan and my dad had gotten comfortable. Too comfortable. They'd spent their lives skating past consequences, leaning on other people's reputations to buffer their own failure. So I wanted this to sting in the way that only exposure could. I made sure the lawsuit filings were public. I submitted documentation to the credit agencies and added my father's name to the investigation. I alerted the notary commission about the forged paperwork. And then I went one step further. I reached out to my old church. Back in the day, my dad used to lead community projects there, food drives, fundraisers. He liked being seen as the pillar of the community. It was one of the few places he still had a good reputation. So I sent them the truth. Every document, every claim, every report. Not with malice, not with a demand, just the facts. The fallout came fast. The first real break happened in court. Ryan didn't show up to the restraining order hearing, but my evidence did. The judge barely blinked before extending the protection order for a full 2 years. Ryan couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my home, or my place of work. Any violation would be immediate grounds for arrest. Then came the criminal investigation. It started slow, interviews, phone calls, document authentication. But once they confirmed the forgery on the property paperwork, things accelerated. The authorities reached out to the notary, my dad's friend. Under pressure, the guy admitted he'd stamped the document without both parties present. A direct violation. His license was suspended. My father was named as a co-conspirator. A few weeks later, Marina forwarded me a copy of the filed charges: forgery, attempted fraud, misrepresentation of legal ownership. Ryan and my dad were both served. And then came the silence. No more texts. No more emails. Just void. Until one morning, I checked the news. It was a local story. Small headline. Community organizer and son charged in property fraud scheme. It wasn't splashed across national headlines or anything. But it was there. Their names. Their photos. A tidy summary of what they'd tried to pull. And that was enough. Enough for the church to distance itself. Enough for old friends to stop calling. Enough for their community halo to crack in two. But the real closure? That came a few weeks later. I was at home, drinking coffee, listening to a blues playlist on shuffle when there was a knock at the door. I checked the camera feed. It was my dad. Alone. He stood there, shoulders hunched, no Ryan in sight. No bag. No swagger. Just him. He looked older. Tired. Like life had finally caught up. I didn't answer. He knocked again. Waited. Then, eventually, he pulled out a piece of paper, folded it neatly, and slipped it under the door. I let it sit there for an hour before I picked it up. It was handwritten. Trevor, I never thought it would come to this. I guess I believed, deep down, that you'd always let us back in. That's what you do. You forgive. You fix. But I pushed too far. I let Ryan pull me into something I can't undo. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I lost my son long before any of this. I just didn't realize it until now. Dad, I read it once, then again, and then I folded it, tucked it away in a drawer, and left it there. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt done. A few months passed. The lawsuit wrapped up in my favor. They were ordered to pay restitution, nothing life-changing, just enough to cover the legal fees and the damage they caused. Ryan tried to dodge the payments, but the court attached it to his tax records. Dad cooperated, probably part of his deal to avoid jail time. My name was cleared, my credit restored. And me? I lived, really lived. I kept teaching photography, picked up a few local clients, even started dating again. A girl named Maya who worked at the coffee shop around the corner. First date was awkward. Second was better. Third, that one felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally walking into something good. I didn't talk about my family much, but I didn't hide them either. They were a chapter in my story, not the whole book. One evening, Maya asked me why I didn't have any pictures of my childhood on the walls. I just smiled. Because my life started here, I said, gesturing to the windows, the sky beyond, the room I had fought to protect. She nodded. That night, I took a photo from the balcony, a long exposure of the city lights stretching into the distance. I printed it the next day, framed it, and hung it above my desk. It wasn't just a picture. It was proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's survival. It's peace. It's walking away with your name intact, your soul untangled, and your future wide open, and knowing they can never take it from you again. My name's Landon. I'm 33, and for as long as I can remember, my cousin Brett has treated our relationship like some kind of lifelong competition, the kind no one else agreed to join. We're only 9 months apart in age, raised more like brothers than cousins. Our mothers are twin sisters who bought houses 3 doors down from each other in a beachside suburb of Southern California. Growing up, we did everything together, summer camps, little league, even shared birthday parties. But somewhere along the way, Brett decided that everything I did had to be a challenge. If I got a bike, he got a better one. If I made the honor roll, he suddenly found his academic drive. When I got into UCLA, he applied to Stanford just so he could brag that he aimed higher. Spoiler alert, he didn't get in. For a while, I let it go. I'm not naturally competitive. I'm the quiet type, more about making moves in silence than chasing validation. I got my degree in architecture, landed a decent job, and spent most of my 20s designing homes up and down the coast while saving every spare dollar I could. I never made a big deal of my work. I just kept my head down and built a life. Brett, meanwhile, bounced around from one big idea to the next. First, it was a dropshipping business, then a podcast, then flipping NFTs. He always had some new hustle that would change everything, and it usually came with Instagram posts about grinding and the hustle never sleeps, while borrowing money from his dad to stay afloat. Still, our paths didn't cross much in our adult years, at least not in any meaningful way, until our grandmother passed away. That's when the family dynamic started to shift. Gran had left behind a modest inheritance, nothing crazy, but enough to make people weird. My share wasn't huge, but combined with what I'd saved over the years, it gave me just enough to finally chase the one dream I'd been quietly working toward: owning a home on the cliffs just north of the beach town we grew up in. I'd spent years walking those bluffs, sketching homes that fit into the rugged terrain like they'd grown there. I knew the zoning laws, the land use regulations, even the lot numbers. And then, like fate had finally nodded in my direction, the perfect property came up for auction, a mid-century fixer-upper sitting on a double lot, with a direct line of sight to the ocean and a little stretch of private path that wound down to the water. The auction was quiet, low-key, mostly contractors and a few out-of-town investors. I was confident going in. I had my limit, my paperwork in order, and a pre-approved mortgage ready to go. But then, 15 minutes before bidding started, I saw him. Brett. Hair slicked back, expensive sunglasses he didn't need, and that arrogant, lopsided smirk he always wore when he thought he was the smartest guy in the room. He spotted me across the crowd, walked right up, and said, "Didn't expect to see you here, cousin. Thought this place was a little out of your league." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I just nodded, turned back to my paperwork, and tried to ignore the familiar pit in my stomach. The one that always formed when Brett turned something personal into a public game. The auction began, and sure enough, Brett jumped in almost immediately. Not just with bids, with smug little comments too. "Oh, you're still in it. Didn't peg you for a Cliffs guy? You sure you've got the budget for this one, Landon?" Every time I raised my hand, he raised his right after. It was obvious he didn't even want the house. He just didn't want me to have it. The other bidders started to back off. It became clear this wasn't a normal auction anymore. It was a grudge match. I held my line. I wasn't about to blow my entire savings trying to one-up a man-child with a superiority complex and no plan. When the bidding crossed my ceiling, I let it go. Brett got the property, laughing as he signed the papers. "Don't worry," he told me on the way out. "Maybe I'll let you mow the lawn." That night, I sat on the beach, just down from the cliff he'd now call home. It should have hurt more, losing the house I'd wanted for years, but strangely, it didn't. Because as I sat there watching the sunset spill gold across the water, I noticed something. The empty lot next door. Smaller, undeveloped, and not nearly as flashy. But it had something the other didn't: elevation. Just enough slope to rise above Brett's new prize. And just like that, a different kind of plan began forming in my head. One that didn't involve winning an auction, but something far more satisfying. I went home, opened my laptop, and started digging. If Brett wanted a game, he was finally going to get one. Only this time, I was playing by my own rules. It didn't take long for Brett to make himself known in the neighborhood. A week after the auction, his social media was flooded with posts about securing the bag and manifesting your dream home. Each one tagged with inspirational captions and the GPS coordinates of the property, subtle as a brick through a window. He posed shirtless on the front porch during demo day, holding a sledgehammer like he'd earned the house with grit and sweat instead of petty spite and deep pockets from his dad. I tried to ignore it. Really, I did. I told myself I'd dodged a bullet, that the house needed way more work than Brett realized, that he'd get bored and sell it off like every other project he'd flaked on. But something about the smugness of his victory kept gnawing at me, like a splinter I couldn't reach. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly doing my homework. The lot next door wasn't on the market yet, but the owner, a retired couple in their late 70s, had moved out of state last year to be closer to their grandkids. The place was empty, overgrown, but still structurally sound. I remembered it from my site visits. It had a different zoning classification, slightly more restrictive, but still viable. I called their real estate agent, left a message, and waited. A few days later, I got a call back. They weren't planning to list publicly yet, but they were open to a private offer. The price was high, not outrageous, but high enough that I had to make some moves. I talked to my bank, leaned on a few contacts, and got pre-approval in motion. It would be tight, tighter than I liked, but doable. And best of all, it was completely under Brett's radar. While the paperwork moved, I kept my distance. I didn't need to poke the bear. Brett, however, seemed determined to flaunt his win. He started inviting family members over for progress walkthroughs, like he was hosting a reality show. My aunt posted a photo of Brett holding up a glass of champagne in the gutted living room with the caption, "My brilliant boy making power moves." That stung a little. Not because I needed validation, but because I'd spent years building my career quietly, professionally. And somehow, this clown was the family golden boy because he played real-life Monopoly. Then came the phone call from my mother. She was trying to play peacemaker, asking if I'd congratulate Brett and let bygones be bygones. "Landon," she said gently, "he didn't really mean to spite you. You probably just got caught up in the moment." "Mom, he mocked me during the auction. In front of strangers." "Well, he does have a dramatic streak. But he's still family." I didn't argue. There was no point. I just told her I was happy for him and changed the subject. Inside, though, something started to shift. The tipping point came 2 weeks later. I was at a quiet diner near the bluff, reviewing the final documents for my lot purchase when I heard familiar laughter behind me. I turned, and sure enough, Brett walked in with 2 of his friends, guys I recognized from high school, the kind who peaked early and still wore Letterman jackets in their 30s. They didn't see me at first, which gave me a front row seat to their conversation. "No, seriously," Brett was saying. "I only bid 'cause I saw Landon sweating bullets. I mean, come on, the guy's been sketching that house since we were 15. I had to do it." One of the guys asked, "You even gonna live there?" Brett shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I flip it just to prove a point." Honestly, I don't care. I just like watching him lose. He always acts so humble, like he's better than everyone. It's fake. I froze. It wasn't just the gloating. It was the venom. The way he twisted my quiet personality into some sort of attack. Like I was arrogant for not chasing attention. I waited until they were seated, then paid my check and left. But something inside me had changed. The lot next door wasn't just a backup plan anymore. It was a mission. A week later, the sale closed. The lot was mine. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom, not my friends, not even my business partner. I wanted to keep it quiet, at least for now. I filed the deed under a holding company I'd set up years ago for a side project. Nothing fancy, just a generic name that wouldn't raise red flags. Brett didn't notice. But the universe has a funny way of pressing on wounds. Our grandmother's birthday rolled around mid-spring, and the family hosted a memorial brunch in her honor. It was supposed to be casual, just a few photos, some food, and stories about Gran. She was the glue of our family. Even Brett, for all his drama, softened around her memory. I hadn't seen him since the auction, and part of me hoped we could just nod at each other and move on. No such luck. The brunch was held at our aunt's house, just 2 blocks from the ocean. I arrived early, helped set up, and tried to keep my head down. Brett showed up fashionably late, in a tailored linen shirt and loafers with no socks. The kind of look that screams, trust fund yacht dad. He made the rounds like a politician, hugging people, making jokes, telling stories like he was the main character. Eventually, he cornered me near the buffet table. Well, if it isn't Mr. Almost. I looked up from my plate. Hey, Brett. He grinned. You still dreaming about that house? I've got the demo almost finished. Thinking of putting in a rooftop deck, maybe a hot tub. Gotta make the most of the ocean view, right? He leaned in slightly, like he wanted the next words to sting. Shame you weren't ready to compete. Maybe next time, huh? I smiled politely. Yeah, maybe next time. He walked off, pleased with himself, but I could feel the rage simmering under my skin. It wasn't just the jab, it was the performance. The need to rub it in front of everyone, like I was the charity case and he was the prodigy. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that my design plans were already in motion. I spent the next few weeks meeting with engineers, surveyors, and contractors. I wasn't building a house. Not yet. I didn't need to. All I needed was one structure, a privacy fence. A legal one, perfectly within code, but tall enough and positioned precisely enough to block a very specific line of sight. Brett's. I learned every angle of his lot. Where the master bedroom window faced, where the future rooftop deck would sit, how the elevation of my lot intersected with his. It was like playing chess in 3 dimensions, and I didn't rush it. Every permit was filed quietly, every material sourced discreetly. The fence wouldn't just block a view, it would be a wall, a quiet, undeniable message. But before I broke ground, something else happened, something that made everything personal on a whole new level. My mother invited me to dinner, just the 2 of us. We were sitting on her porch, drinking tea, when she casually mentioned that Brett had been showing off the house plans again, that he was planning a big housewarming party once it was done. I nodded politely. Then she hesitated. Landon, I know you were upset, but Brett told us he only bid because he assumed you'd already dropped out. He didn't mean anything by it. I raised an eyebrow. He told you that? She nodded. He said he even offered to let you buy it off him, but you turned it down. I stared at her, stunned. Mom, he never said that. She looked uncomfortable. Well, he implied. I cut her off gently. Brett lies, Mom. He lied to you. The conversation soured quickly after that. She defended him, of course. Said I was too sensitive. That I held grudges. That family doesn't keep score. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. Brett had manipulated the narrative, twisted the story, made himself the generous victor and me the bitter loser. And people believed him. Even the ones who should have known better. It wasn't the property I'd lost. It was my reputation within the family. And that was the betrayal I couldn't forget. So I went home, and I finalized every blueprint, every permit, every delivery schedule for that fence. I made sure it complied with every code, followed every setback law, and still accomplished exactly what I wanted. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the first move. I didn't speak to anyone in the family for a while after that dinner. I wasn't angry, not in the way people assume, not shouting, slamming doors, or posting cryptic Facebook updates. No, mine was a quieter kind of betrayal, the kind that doesn't scream, but simmers just beneath the surface. It was the silence that comes when you realize you've been painted as the villain in a story you didn't even know was being written. That your own mother thought you were petty for not applauding the person who humiliated you publicly, then lied about it later. I didn't cut people off. I just stepped back. The days passed slower after that. I'd go to work, clock in, meet clients, review blueprints, design homes for strangers while my own dreams sat smudged and unfinished on a mental sketchpad I no longer felt like opening. The lot next to Brett's remained undeveloped for months. I wasn't in a rush anymore. What once felt like momentum now felt like inertia. I'd done the smart thing, the patient thing. I'd played the long game. But sitting alone in my small rental apartment, staring at my plans in the dim light of my desk lamp, I couldn't help but feel like I'd still lost. Brett's house, meanwhile, came together with the speed of a show home build. His father's connections helped. He used family money for the best materials, flashy finishes, and an over-the-top rooftop deck complete with glass railing and recessed lighting. All aimed, of course, at maximizing that ocean view. He even posted a time-lapse video of the whole construction process, turning a dream into reality. The caption read, "More hashtags, more praise." The comments poured in. Extended family, old friends, even mutual acquaintances who barely knew him, all congratulating him on his vision. I stayed off social media for a while after that. But if I'm being honest, the hardest part wasn't Brett. It was the loneliness. The isolation that crept in after years of working in silence, of prioritizing stability over spectacle. You get so used to keeping your head down that one day you look up and realize everyone else has moved on without you. That they took your quiet nature as absence. That they believed the louder voice by default, simply because it was louder. I started second-guessing everything. Was I too cautious? Too quiet? Had I made myself invisible? And then came the worst moment of all. The real bottom. It was the night of Brett's housewarming party. I hadn't been invited. No surprise there. But most of the family had. My mother, my aunt, even my younger sister, who texted me mid-evening. "Are you really not coming? It's actually really fun. The view is insane." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove out to the coast. Not to spy. Not to be petty. Just to remember. I parked along the overlooked trail, a public path I'd walked 1,000 times before, and climbed up to the old vantage point. From there, I could see both lots, Brett's, now lit up like a celebrity compound, and mine, still empty, still quiet. Its outlines only visible if you knew what you were looking for. The laughter carried on the wind. Music, clinking glasses, people dancing on that glass-railed deck. And for a moment, I truly wondered if I was the fool. If all my planning, my silent revenge, my dignity, if any of it mattered. That night, I drove home and seriously considered selling the lot. The market was good. I'd make a decent profit. I could move on, start over. Maybe even leave the coast entirely. But I didn't. Instead, the next morning, I woke up at dawn, walked to my desk, opened my sketchpad, and redrew the plans from scratch. Not for a house, not even for a fence, but for a sanctuary. If I was going to stay, I needed something more than revenge. I needed peace. I needed a space that was mine, not in reaction to Brett, not to outdo anyone, but just mine. So I shifted the design. I pulled back the southern edge, carved out a stone meditation area with a cascading water feature and native plants that wouldn't block the view, but would soften the edge. I added a library loft, just big enough for a reading nook with a west-facing window. I brought in the best acoustic engineer I could find and asked them to help me design a space so quiet you could hear the tide change. I told no one, but I started to come back to life. Work picked up again. I took on a new client, a young couple who wanted their dream home built up in Big Sur, and they gave me full creative freedom. It was the kind of project that reminded me why I loved architecture in the first place. Not just the lines and angles, but the feeling, the emotional blueprint that lived under every wall. With the new commission came new confidence. And with that confidence, a kind of emotional distance from Brett's nonsense. His bragging started to feel more hollow, like noise in the background of a much better song I'd forgotten I was writing. The turning point came in early fall. I was sitting at a small coffee shop in town when I overheard a conversation between two women at the next table. They were talking about Brett's house. "Yeah, it's gorgeous," one said. "But it's just so loud. Everything's shiny. And the deck's beautiful. But I heard it overlooks a construction site now. The other woman laughed. Oh, that? Yeah. Some architect bought the lot next door. No one knows what he's building yet. But apparently it's going to be private. Real private. I sipped my coffee, smiled, and went back to sketching. Because by then, the permits were approved. And the materials were ordered. And the fence, my fence, was no longer just a wall. It was the first line of a new home. One built not out of spite, but intention. The world still thought I was licking my wounds. But quietly, brick by brick, I was rebuilding something far stronger. And when Brett finally realized what I'd done, well, let's just say the view was about to change. Construction began 3 days after my 30th birthday. No big celebration, no balloons, no social media announcements. Just the soft rumble of excavation equipment rolling onto the lot and the first hum of progress in the form of foundation stakes being driven into the soil. I stood on the edge of the site that morning, coffee in hand, watching as the crew began marking off the first trench lines for the footings. A warm breeze drifted up from the coast, carrying with it the scent of salt water and a promise. The lot I bought was narrow but elevated, and my design took full advantage of that. A minimalist, coastal modern structure with clean lines, natural wood accents, and high privacy walls where it counted. But the real gem was the western slope, where my fence, perfectly legal and perfectly positioned, would eventually rise just high enough to obscure the view from Brett's brand new rooftop deck. Not entirely. That would have been too obvious. Too easy to challenge. No, I had a better idea. One that would frustrate him not with a wall, but with a carefully orchestrated interruption of his illusion of supremacy. Instead of building the fence straight across, I designed it with staggered wooden panels, architectural fins that alternated in height, spaced artistically and aligned at a calculated angle. It was modern, chic, the kind of thing you'd find in an elite design magazine. But functionally, it sliced his panoramic ocean view into awkward, broken segments, jagged slats of sky and water interrupted by warm cedar blades and ornamental bamboo. He'd still technically have a view, just not one worth bragging about. And I wasn't done. See, I'd spent the last few months learning things about zoning, about city ordinances, about sound dispersion and property line rights. I studied how shadows fell during the late afternoon sun. I mapped out how landscaping could redirect sight lines without being classified as an obstruction. I hired the best lighting designer I could afford and gave them a strange, but very specific brief. I wanted the softest, warmest low-voltage garden lighting that would subtly bounce light upward at night, just enough to glow on the side of Brett's house without breaking any codes. Make it look unintentional, I told the designer. Just a little, ambient. And slowly, I gathered my allies. Not co-conspirators, no one who even knew the full scope, but professionals who trusted my vision. My contractor, Miguel, was an old friend from college, one of the most precise builders I knew. He never asked why the fence panels were angled the way they were. He just made sure they were installed within a millimeter of the blueprint. My landscape architect, Janine, had an eye for blending native vegetation with purposeful intention. I told her I wanted natural privacy. She gave me an outdoor garden that could have doubled as a monastery courtyard. Thick, soft reeds, eucalyptus screens, strategically placed boulders. And my lighting expert, Aita, treated the outdoor space like a canvas. Every glow, every reflection, every beam. It was all orchestrated to say one thing. This space is mine. Brett, of course, noticed the construction eventually. I could feel it happen before I even saw him. The quiet shift in energy. The first time I caught him standing at the edge of his deck, arms crossed, watching as my framing crew hoisted the first long beam into place. He didn't wave. Neither did I. A few days later, I got a call from my mom. Brett says you're building something right next to his house. He sounded concerned. Concerned about what? I asked flatly. She hesitated. He says it's intrusive. I almost laughed. Intrusive? You know how he gets. He's just saying it blocks some of his light. Or the view. Or maybe it's too tall. It's within code, I replied calmly. Permits approved. Everything's legal. She didn't push further, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. And that's when I realized Brett was starting to lose control of the narrative. For once, he couldn't outmuscle me with money or charm. He couldn't spin this into some cute family rivalry. Because I wasn't playing that game anymore. I wasn't reacting. I was moving with intent. But that didn't stop him from trying. He showed up on my lot the following week. Uninvited. I was walking the site with Miguel, discussing roof overhangs and solar panel placements when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, look who's back in the game. I turned. Brett stood at the edge of the gravel path, arms spread like he was greeting an old friend. He wore aviator sunglasses and a Patagonia vest over a crisp white tee, the kind of outfit that screamed, "I watched a TED Talk about leadership once." I didn't smile. "Morning," I said curtly. Miguel gave me a look and quietly stepped away, leaving us alone. Brett walked forward, surveying the skeletal frame of my house. "Didn't think you'd actually build on this lot," he said, gesturing around. "Not a ton of space. Kind of boxed in, don't you think?" I stayed silent. He cleared his throat. "I mean, no offense, but it's not exactly ideal for a cliff property. Especially with my deck right there. Not much of a view left, huh?" I tilted my head slightly. "I'm not building for the view." He blinked. "Then what are you building for?" I met his eyes. "Peace." That threw him off. Just for a second. His smirk twitched. "Right. Well, I guess everyone has their priorities." Then, as if remembering why he came, he straightened. "Look, I'll cut to the chase. I've been talking to a friend on the planning board. He says you're putting up some kind of segmented fence." I nodded. "Is that really necessary?" he asked. "I mean, you and I, sure, we've had our differences, but we're family. Don't you think a regular fence would be enough?" I let the silence stretch. "You mean the kind that doesn't block your deck?" I asked finally. He shifted. "I'm just saying, maybe we don't escalate. I've got investors looking at my property. Long-term plans. I'd hate for that to get complicated." There it was. The real reason. Not concern. Not sentiment. Just his wallet. His image. I gave him a small, tired smile. "Then maybe you shouldn't have made this personal." He didn't reply. Just turned and walked away. That was the last conversation we had. But it wasn't the end of the setup. No, because the next step wasn't about him. It was about completing the space. The one I'd designed from the ground up, not just to exist beside him, but beyond him. The one that would serve as living proof that dignity could be louder than ego. That the quiet one sometimes wins, not by shouting, but by building something worth looking at. By early winter, the exterior was complete. The fencing panels rose like sculptures, staggered and sleek, casting long shadows across Brett's deck every afternoon just before sunset. The landscape glowed softly in the evenings, and my meditation garden took shape beneath a canopy of eucalyptus and coastal pine. There was no sign, no announcement, just a quiet, powerful presence where there had once been an empty lot. And then, the final move, the appraisal. A few weeks later, I requested a market valuation of my property through a private firm, not for selling, but for documentation. I'd made improvements, added equity, and the new appraisal came back significantly higher than Brett's, thanks to the rising market and my design choices. It was quiet, private, but word got around. A month later, Brett put his house on the market. He claimed it was time for a new venture, that he never intended to settle down here anyway. But I knew the truth. Because for the first time in his life, he couldn't win. Not with money. Not with charm. Not even with proximity. Because I hadn't just blocked his view. I'd built my own. And I wasn't done yet. By the time Brett officially listed his house, his tone had completely shifted. Gone were the Instagram stories flaunting sunset views and rooftop champagne. Gone were the brunch photos with captions like "manifesting greatness" or "hustle meets horizon." Instead, his social feed went quiet. His realtor, a flashy, overconfident guy I'd seen around town, put up a listing that emphasized the modern architecture and recent upgrades, but conveniently skipped over the fact that the ocean view was no longer what it used to be. And how could it be? From the edge of his rooftop deck, the same deck he once bragged about to everyone in our family, you could now see elegant vertical fins made of reclaimed cedar, carved like pieces of art, cutting the horizon into vertical strips. It wasn't just a fence. It was a statement. A sculptural privacy piece that looked intentional, legal, and expensive. And it was. Every element had been placed with surgical precision to interrupt one thing: his experience of superiority. At first, I thought that would be enough. I didn't need him to grovel. I didn't need an apology. I thought, this is it. He'll leave, sell the house at a loss, move on to his next hustle, and I'll enjoy the silence of my new sanctuary. But Brett didn't leave. Not right away. because the market wasn't cooperating. For all his bravado, Brett had over-leveraged himself. He poured too much into renovations, assuming a quick flip. But the high-end buyers? They noticed the fencing, the lighting, the way the lot next door seemed more desirable, more modern, more purposeful. Several walked through my property while house hunting and skipped his entirely. I heard this through Miguel, who was now taking on other projects in the area, and overheard more than one couple say, "We'd rather wait and see what the house next door does." I never listed my house. I never planned to. But Brett's dream sale quietly withered. Weeks passed, then months. He started reaching out. It began with a casual text. "Brett, hey man, meant to say, your place looks amazing. Super impressed. We should grab a beer sometime and catch up." I didn't respond. A few days later, another text. "Brett, quick cue. Any chance you'd consider, buying me out? I'm thinking about other opportunities and figured it'd be cleaner to sell to someone local. You'd be my first pick, obviously." Still, I didn't respond. And that silence? That's what broke him. Because Brett needed to win publicly. He needed the narrative, the performance. And I was denying him that. There was no audience for him to show off to anymore. Just a neighbor who wouldn't play his game. Then, the phone call came. A number I recognized but hadn't saved. His father. My uncle. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was calm but strained. "Landon, listen. I know things have been tense. But Brett's in a bit of a bind. He's under pressure to sell and hasn't had luck. If there's anything you can do to help facilitate something fair, I think it'd go a long way for the family." He paused, then added, "And your mother mentioned you're doing quite well now. Everyone's proud." I played that message twice. Not out of malice, but for closure. Because for the first time in years, I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I was the revenge. Quietly, respectfully, I had taken everything he wanted and made it irrelevant. Not by attacking him, but by outgrowing the game. By building something real while he built an image. But still, I wasn't done. Because Brett had made this personal. And while I'd never wanted a war, I was ready to end it. So I called him. Short and to the point. "Hey," I said. He sounded relieved. "Landon, man, thank you for calling back." I was starting to think. "I'll make you an offer," I said. "But not for your asking price." Silence. "I've reviewed your listing," I continued. "You've been sitting on the market for 4 months. You've dropped your price twice. Your deck faces a privacy feature. The view's compromised. You've maxed out on zoning, and I know for a fact your financing was structured assuming a full ROI within 6 months." Another pause. "I'll offer 20% below market," I said. "And I want the furniture included." He tried to protest. Tried to pull the, "but it's a premium property" line. I didn't argue. I just said, "This is a clean deal. Cash. No agents. Close in 2 weeks." He stalled for 2 more days, trying to bluff. But I knew the numbers. I knew his leverage had evaporated. So when he finally called back, voice small, humbled, I met him at a local notary's office and signed the paperwork. Just like that, the house was mine. The same house he fought to take from me. The one he paraded in front of the family, declared his victory, mocked me for losing. And now? Now it belonged to the quiet cousin. And here's the thing I never told him. I didn't want the house anymore. I didn't need it. But owning it meant it would never be his again. It meant I could repurpose it. So I walked through that house one final time. Room by room. All the showy fixtures. The oversized wine fridge. The rooftop deck that no longer saw the ocean. And then I called a friend, Ava, a local nonprofit director I'd worked with on a community design project the year before. "I've got something for you," I said. "Ever thought about turning a luxury house into a creative retreat space? For artists, architects, people who need time away to work on something real?" She said yes. And a month later, Brett's dream home reopened its doors, not as a monument to his ego, but as a sanctuary for people doing meaningful work. I funded the renovations anonymously. I let Ava take full credit. As for me, I lived next door in the house I built. My house. The one that started as a silent rebellion and ended as a place of peace. I didn't brag. I didn't post. But one evening, as the sun dipped low and the wind rustled the tall grass along the bluff, I stood on my deck with a cup of tea and watched as a young artist carried her sketchpad up the path to Brett's old rooftop. She looked out across the horizon, smiling softly, taking in the fragmented strips of sea and sky. And I smiled too, because I hadn't just reclaimed my dream. I'd redefined it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt free. Some fences are built to keep people out, but the best ones are built to keep peace in.